Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. As tax season begins, President Trump launches Trump Accounts, the new savings program aimed at helping families build long-term wealth for their children. We have the latest on a high-profile summit in the nation's capital. Secretary of State Marco Rubio appears before the Senate today to outline President Trump's Venezuela policy. It's the first time Rubio has publicly faced lawmakers' questions since the capture of Maduro. President Trump repeated his demand that Iran come to the table and make a deal on nuclear weapons. The president said if not, the next U.S. attack would be far worse. And a government funding deadline is approaching as lawmakers remain divided over DHS spending. A look at the negotiations and the latest on ICE operations in Minnesota. Amazon cutting 16,000 jobs in its second round of layoffs in 3 months. What's behind the cuts?
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 28th. I'm Carrie Dunst. President Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are hosting a summit in Washington as they officially launch the so-called Trump Accounts. The savings program is a central piece of the president's signature tax and spending legislation. He's rolling it out as Americans begin filing their 2025 tax returns. Under the plan, the federal government will deposit $1,000 for every child born between 2025 and 2028, starting in July. Families can add to the accounts along with employer contributions, with funds invested in the broader stock market and locked until the age of 18 for the child. Several major companies, including Schwab, Robinhood, they've already pledged to match the government's initial contribution. Treasury officials say more corporate commitments are expected as the administration promotes the program as a long-term investment in American families. And President Trump today urged Iran to come to the table and make a deal on nuclear weapons, or the next U.S. attack would be far worse. In a Truth Social post, Trump said a massive armada of U.S. naval force is heading toward Iran, led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and other warships. The president says the fleet is moving with purpose and it remains ready to fulfill its mission swiftly if needed. Trump repeated his long-standing demand that Iran agree to a deal that includes no nuclear weapons. The president says time is running out and that any attack will be far worse than the Operation Midnight Hammer, which took out the country's nuclear capabilities. The U.S. deployment comes amid heightened tensions over the protests in Iran and the regime's violent repression, which has left thousands of protesters dead. And Amazon is laying off 16,000 employees. It marks the company's second major round of job cuts in 3 months. The company says it's striving to stay competitive in the fast-moving AI sector. In a blog post, Amazon said the reductions are aimed at speeding up decision-making by cutting layers of bureaucracy. The company had previously announced the elimination of 14,000 corporate jobs in October. Now, the moves are part of CEO Andy Jassy's push to run Amazon with the agility of a startup. Combined, the layoffs represent about 9% of Amazon's corporate workforce. The company says the cuts are focused on efficiency rather than cost savings. Amazon says it will continue hiring in areas critical to its future growth. And the Federal Reserve is widely expected to hold interest rates steady while it announces its policy decision today, a pause that investors believe could extend through the spring. Recent economic data shows continued resilience. The unemployment rate fell to 4.4% in December, even as job growth slowed. Inflation remains elevated, with economists expecting the Fed's preferred inflation gauge to come in at about 3% year over year. Now, that's above the central bank's 2% target. Some analysts are saying strong consumer spending and supportive fiscal policy have reduced the urgency for any additional rate cuts. Meanwhile, President Trump, he's called for sharper rate cuts. Trump also commented on the slipping U.S. dollar yesterday and whether that could be helpful for people in Iowa.
The dollar's value decline more. Would that be helpful to Iowa?
No, I'd want it to be just seek its own level, which is the fair thing to do. You could have it. I could have it go up or go down like a yo-yo.
Prices surged to record levels on Wednesday, rising above $5,300 an ounce for the very first time. Now, this rise comes as confidence in the dollar weakens. Analysts say demand is being driven by shifting confidence in the global monetary policy, as well as a search for safe haven assets, which of course gold is. The dollar remains near 4-year lows, making dollar-priced gold more attractive to overseas buyers. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now addressing the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the situation in Venezuela. Let's tune into that hearing.
Trump and Marco Rubio for what they have done. There are a lot of Americans today who wouldn't be alive if not for your commitment and dedication to stemming the flow of drugs into our country. The actions in Venezuela were limited in scope, short in duration, and done to protect U.S. interests and citizens. What President Trump has done in Venezuela is the definition of the president's Article 2 constitutional authorities as commander-in-chief, and wholly consistent with what other presidents' efforts and what they have done and actions they have taken to protect the American people from threats in our own hemisphere. In fact, President George H.W. Bush authorized similar, but much broader and more extensive military operations to arrest and bring Panama's Manuel Noriega to the United States to stand trial for drug-related charges. In that case, President Bush deployed more than 9,000 troops into Panama for more than a month. At the time, all leaders of the Senate, including Democrats, praised that move. Unlike in Panama, President Trump authorized a much more limited military action in Venezuela, with only about 200 troops inside the country for a couple of hours and a firefight that lasted less than 27 minutes, with no loss of life on the United States side, but significant casualties on the other side. This military action was incredibly brief, targeted, and successful. When bad guys are in the business of flying drugs into the United States, drugs that kill our children, hurt our country, violate U.S. laws, and destabilize our hemisphere, then they'll have to be held to answer for those actions, and that's what's being done now. Maduro was not recognized as a legitimate leader of Venezuela by President Trump, or even by President Biden, or by most of the international community. It is a service to the world that this illegitimate leader is no longer in power. Now the United States has a tremendous opportunity before us in Venezuela. Because of the complexity of this operation, there has been some confusion as to how it will be done. I've been impressed by the way you, Secretary Rubio, have explained the plan to me going forward right from the start. It is clear and it's doable. I know you'll lay that out for us here today. Venezuela's natural resources have frequently been used to bolster the economy of our adversaries, especially China. Through President Trump's actions, we have effectively cut off that supply, giving the United States tremendous leverage. After our lengthy engagements in the Middle East in years past, many Americans are rightfully concerned about so-called forever wars. I know this administration is laser-focused on avoiding those experiences. With Nicolas Maduro out of power, the United States has the opportunity to better protect America by bringing stability to Venezuela. The country has a history of democracy, capitalism, and a respect for human rights. It is only during the last two dictatorships that it has lost these attributes. The Venezuelan people are not strangers to these concepts and long to have them reinstated. They have you and the President Trump to thank for giving them another chance. It is all our hope that the Venezuelan people will soon be able to hold free and fair elections for their leaders. To get there, Venezuela may require U.S. and international oversight to ensure these elections are indeed free and fair, unlike their most recent elections. Secretary Rubio, thank you for being here today. I look forward to a productive discussion. And with that, I'd like to hear the distinguished ranking member's views on these matters. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back, Secretary Rubio. Thank you for being here. I certainly agree with the chairman in terms of his comments relative to Nicolas Maduro. He was bad for Venezuela, he was bad for the region, and he was bad for the United States. I think the question we have to ask now is, was the raid to arrest him worth the cost? And I also share the chairman's admiration for the military operation that took him out. But the U.S. naval blockade around Venezuela and the raid have already cost American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Outside estimates are as high as $1 billion. And yet the Maduro regime is essentially still in power. All the same people are running the country. Maduro's vice president, now the interim president, has taken no steps to diminish Iran, China, or Russia's considerable influence in Venezuela, one of the reasons that has been given for the mission. Her cooperation appears tactical and temporary and not a real shift in Venezuela's alignment. In the process, we've traded one dictator for another. So it's no wonder that so many of my constituents are asking, why is the president spending so much time focused on Venezuela instead of the cost of living and their kitchen table economic concerns? Unfortunately, I think this has been a pattern across the administration, losing sight of what actually advances America's interests and delivers results for the American people. Take the elimination of personnel and departments that were critical to our national security, for example. These are cost-effective tools like Voice of America that help us advance America's interests globally. And Mr. Secretary, as you remember, you strongly supported most of these programs when you were on this side of the dais. The administration says those cuts were about saving money, but the total federal spending last year went up by 4%, not down. We spent more, not less. As a result, our adversaries like China are expanding their influence. And there is broad bipartisan agreement in Congress that China is the central strategic challenge of our time. The president himself has said that as well. But we're cutting foreign aid and diplomacy tools. We're leaving embassies without leadership. We're shutting down counter-disinformation programs. We are driving talent away from the United States while Beijing is actively recruiting it. And I would just like to point out, this is a picture of the globe. These are countries where China has ambassadors in those countries. All of the red, those are China. And places where their diplomats are on the ground, except, of course, for China, which is in blue, and they don't need to put diplomats there. This map, this is where we have diplomats. You can see the red is where we're filled, and look at all of the white, where we do not have ambassadors on the ground. We're even giving China some of our most advanced semiconductors. And after a year of tariffs that were supposed to make us stronger, China has posted the largest trade surplus in history. And American families are paying more at a time when the prices were already too high. Since the start of the tariff campaign in 2025, U.S. manufacturing employment has fallen by anywhere from 50 to 70,000 jobs, depending on whose estimates you look at. That's a trend that undercuts promises that tariffs would bring factory jobs roaring back. And instead of creating a united front against China, we're pushing our closest allies into their arms. Just look at Canada, whose business with the state of New Hampshire has been really critical. They recently cut a trade deal with China because they no longer view the United States as a reliable partner. Pushing allies away like that is not strategic competition. It is unilateral disarmament. We see the same gap between rhetoric and reality in how this administration deals with other authoritarian regimes. At a time when Iran is violently cracking down on protests, the U.S. is coming to agreements to deport Iranians in this country back to Iran, people who will face persecution and interrogation by Iranian security forces. And yet President Trump told the Iranian people that help was on the way. But the United States has largely stood on the sidelines as the situation has deteriorated. Americans are right in thinking that the Trump administration is tougher on our allies than on most of our adversaries. I just returned from Denmark, where I met with Danish and Greenlandic leaders. Senator Coons was also on that trip. He led it. What I heard directly is that President Trump's threats to take Greenland have shaken public confidence in the United States to the core. And this from an ally who first recognized the new United States of America in 1792, has fought on our side in both world wars and in Afghanistan. And I heard from one Danish-American woman whose son holds both citizenships and is approaching conscription age, that she's worried that her son might one day be forced to choose between the two countries that he loves. That kind of fear would have been unthinkable 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 50 years ago. There is no strategic objective in Greenland that cannot be achieved through cooperation. The only thing these threats have accomplished is weakening trust in the United States. That trust is the foundation of our alliances, and at a moment when Russia is waging the largest land war in Europe since World War II, we should be strengthening allied unities. Instead, we're undermining it. European allies are worried about open conflict with the United States. Canadian trading partners are turning toward China instead of the U.S., and the constant threat of new tariffs raising prices and making it impossible for businesses to invest is ever present. So, from Venezuela to Europe, the United States is spending more, risking more, and achieving less. That does not project strength. It hands our adversaries exactly what they want. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. We're now going to hear from Secretary Rubio. After that, we'll do a round of 5-minute questions. And so with that, Secretary Rubio, welcome back to the committee. Love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll be brief in my opening statement so we can leave more time for questions. I've submitted a written statement, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to talk to you guys for a few minutes. And
all right, here we go. Suspend. You know the drill. Off to jail.
That's a war crime.
That's a one-year ban from the committee. Anyone who is a persistent violator will be banned for 3 years. So don't know whether the guy falls in that category. Looks like it. I hope after 3 years you'll find a more productive means of employment. Secretary Rubio, we have 2 hearings a week. You know, you seem to have a more robust following than most of our witnesses that come before us. But anyway.
There'll be a couple more, so thank you for stopping the clock, but I appreciate it. So, and I know there's a lot of other topics you're going to ask me about, so we can talk about those, including the ones that Senator Shaheen just outlined. But let me just talk about Venezuela in particular.
Please.
I think we can talk, if you want. I'm sure your questions will be about what happened before and led up to in the operation. I want to focus my comments this morning on what happens now and moving forward, because you're going to ask about the going back. And let me just say this. What is our goal going in? We had in our hemisphere a regime operated by an indicted narco-trafficker that became a base of operation for virtually every competitor, adversary, and enemy in the world. It was, for Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter at a 20% discount per barrel in some cases. And so you had basically 3 of our primary opponents in the world operating from our hemisphere from that spot. It was also a place where you had a narco-trafficking regime that openly cooperated with the FARC and the ELN and other drug trafficking organizations using their national territory. It was an enormous strategic risk for the United States, not halfway around the world, not in another continent, but in the hemisphere in which we all live. And it was having dramatic impacts on us, but also on Colombia and on the Caribbean basin and all sorts of other places. It was an untenable situation, and it had to be addressed. And it was addressed. And now the question becomes what happens moving forward. As I've described to you in previous settings and in individual conversations, we had 3 objectives here. The final, I'll work it backwards, because the end state here is we want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela, and democratic, in which all elements of society are represented, and free and fair elections. By the way, you can have elections. You can have elections all day. But if the opposition has no access to the media, if opposition candidates are routinely dismissed and unable to be on the ballot because the government, those aren't free and fair elections. That's the end state that we want. Free, fair, prosperous, and friendly Venezuela. We're not going to get there in 3 weeks. It's going to take some time. And so objective number 1 was stability. In the aftermath of the removal of Maduro, the concern was what happens in Venezuela. Is there civil war? Do the different factions start going at each other? Are 1 million people crossing the border into Colombia? All of that has been avoided. And one of the primary ways that it has been avoided is the ability to establish direct, honest, respectful, but very direct and honest conversations with the people who today control the elements of that nation. meaning the law enforcement, the government apparatus, et cetera. And one of the tools that's available to us is the fact that we have sanctions on oil. There is oil that is sanctioned that cannot move from Venezuela because of our quarantine. And so what we did is we entered into an arrangement with them. And the arrangement is this: on the oil that is sanctioned in quarantine, we will allow you to move it to market. We will allow you to move it to market at market prices, not at the discount China was getting. In return, the funds from that will be deposited into an account that we will have oversight over. And you will spend that money for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. Why was that important? Venezuela was running out of storage capacity. Okay? They were producing oil, they were drilling oil, they had nowhere to put it. They had nowhere to move it, and they were facing a fiscal crunch. They needed money in the immediacy to fund the police officer, the sanitation workers, the daily operations of government. And so we've been able to create a short-term mechanism. This is not going to be the permanent mechanism, but this is a short-term mechanism in which the needs of the Venezuelan people can be met through a process that we've created, where they will submit every month a budget of this is what we need funded. We will provide for them at the front end what that money cannot be used for. And they've been very cooperative in this regard. In fact, they have pledged to use a substantial amount of those funds to purchase medicine and equipment directly from the United States. As in fact, one of the things they need is dilutin, depending how you want to pronounce it. And that basically is the light crude that you need to mix with their heavy crude in order for the oil to be able to be mixed and moved. They used to get 100% of that from Russia. They are now getting 100% of that from the United States. So we're using that short-term mechanism both to stabilize the country, but also to make sure that the oil proceeds that are currently being generated through the licenses we'll now begin to issue on the sanctioned oil goes to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, not to fund the system that existed in the past. The second is a period of recovery. And that is the phase in which you want to see a normalized oil industry. Again, look, we've got plenty of oil. There's plenty of oil all over the world. Canada produces heavy crude, so it's not like Venezuela's oil is unique in that regard, despite the fact they have the largest known reserves in the world. It's not irreplaceable. But we understand that that is the lifeline. Their natural resources are going to allow Venezuela to be stable and prosperous moving forward. And so we have created what we hope to do is transition to a mechanism that allows that to be sold in a normal way, a normal oil industry, not one dominated by cronies, not one dominated by graft and corruption. To that end, the authorities there deserve some credit. They have passed a new hydrocarbon law that basically eradicates many of the Chavez-era restrictions on private investment in the oil industry. It probably doesn't go far enough to attract sufficient investment, but it's a big step from where they were 3 weeks ago. So that's a major change. We can address some of the other components, but I'll run out of time. But one of the parts of the transition phase, or the recovery phase, is beginning to create space for different voices inside of Venezuelan politics to have an ability to speak out. Part of that is the release of political prisoners. By some estimates, up to 2,000. They are releasing them. They are releasing them probably slower than I would like them to, but they are releasing them. And in fact, you're starting to see some of the people being released beginning to speak out and participate in political life in the country. We have a long ways to go. Look, we can talk in more detail about all of these things. Suffice it to say, I'm not here to claim to you this is going to be easy or simple. I am saying that in 3.5, almost 4 weeks, we are much further along on this project than we thought we would be, given the complexities of it going into it. And I recognize that it won't be easy. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people over there that have spent most of their lives living in a gangster paradise. So it's not going to be like from one day to the next, we're going to have this thing turn around overnight. But I think we're making good and decent progress. It is the best plan, and we are certainly better off today in Venezuela than we were 4 weeks ago. And I think and hope and expect that we'll be better off in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months than we would have been had Maduro still been there. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Secretary Rubio. We'll now do a round of questions, 5 minutes each. I'd like to start, and I'd ask you to go. I understand we're not in a classified setting, but I think a lot of people had no understanding of the groundwork that was done before the actual action took place. I was incredibly impressed with what you told me about how you, the president, negotiated with parties there on the ground, particularly the parties who were going to be in charge after Maduro was removed. And I wonder if you could talk about that for a minute, understanding that we aren't in a classified setting. And I'd like to, if you could, say a few things about.
Well, one of the things I've come to maybe more fully appreciate than I didn't when I was here in the Senate was the number of contingencies that the Department of War plans for all over the world. The overwhelming vast majority of them will never come to fruition. But there's all kinds of contingencies that are planned for. And one contingency that had to be planned for is the fact that sitting in Venezuela with a $50 million reward on his head was an indicted narco trafficker. In fact, I believe it's the largest reward we've ever issued for anybody. I would remind everybody the Biden administration had a $25 million reward on an indicted narco trafficker, the same person. And so, multiple administrations from both parties have wanted this man arrested. And one of the options the president had before him was the opportunity, if things didn't work out, to go in and remove this individual because he was wanted in a law enforcement operation. Now, obviously, a law enforcement operation against the de facto head of a regime is not as simple as going after some fugitive hiding in a closet somewhere. It required planning, and it required eliminating anything that was a threat to the forces that were going in to extract him. I want to be clear, and I'll share with you what I've shared publicly. We made multiple attempts to get Maduro to leave voluntarily and to avoid all of this because we understood that he was an impediment to progress. You couldn't make a deal with this guy. Okay? This guy has made multiple deals. He's broken every one of them. As a point of example, he made a deal with the Biden administration, and here was the deal that he made. It was a bad deal. We knew he wouldn't keep it. He made the following deal. Pardon my nephews, his nephews, who were convicted narco traffickers, convicted already and serving time in jail. Pardon them. Pardon and release Alex Saab, who was his money man, his bag man, primarily in charge of the portfolio with Iran. Release these people. He, in turn, agreed to release some political prisoners, which he did. Many of them were subsequently exiled or rearrested, and that he would hold free and fair elections, which he did not. In fact, he basically disqualified Maria Corina Machado and any other candidate. And Edmundo Gonzalez ends up being the nominee for the opposition party simply because they forgot to ban him. And they forgot to put him on the ban list. And then despite that, he loses an election that everyone around the world recognizes an illegitimate election. So he's made previous deals. In fact, he's broken so many deals, not even the Vatican has been willing to interact with Maduro in the past because he's broken so many of these deals. He's just simply not a guy you can make a deal with. He had no intent of keeping it. What he wanted to do was tap us along and buy 3 years of time until he could deal with a new administration that he thought may be more favorable, et cetera. He was an impediment to progress. None of the things we're talking about now, not the release of political prisoners, not the transition of the oil industry to a legitimate oil industry, not the erosion of Iranian, Russian, or Chinese influence. None of these things would have been possible as long as Maduro was there. And so this was one option that was available to the president after exhausting every other option to remove this individual from the scene. Again, I'm not here to tell you these are all going to be roses along the way and it's all going to go perfectly. But for the first time in 20 years, we are having serious counter-narcotic talks with Venezuelan authorities about going after narcotics organizations. For the first time in 20 years, we are having serious conversations about eroding and eliminating the Iranian presence, the Chinese influence, the Russian presence as well. In fact, I would tell you that there are many elements there in Venezuela that welcome a return to establishing relations to the United States on multiple fronts. We are at the end talking about a Western country that has a long history of cooperation and work with the United States. At one time, Venezuela, pre-Chavez, was a very strong U.S. ally. And we hope to get back to that point. We're not there. This thing still is in its infancy. But I certainly think a lot of progress has been made in that regard.
I was impressed with your description of the fact how careful you were in the operation not to dismantle either institutions or infrastructure because you wanted to see the Venezuelan people take that over and get back on their feet again. I think that was really a wise decision to make and have it as surgical as it was. The last thing I'd ask about, if you could touch on for just a minute, is I know you spent a considerable period of time negotiating with the people that were going to do day-to-day operations, the Venezuelans who were going to fill the vacuum. How's that going, and how do you feel about where we are there?
Well, first of all, let me understand something. I spent 14 years in the U.S. Senate going after these people pretty hard, along with many of you. So, I mean, I understand who they are, and I understand this portfolio from a personal level quite well. So we're very realistic about what we're dealing with here. We also understand that in geopolitics, sometimes that's required. And in this particular case, there are an alignment of interests. And we certainly think that the approach we're taking is preferable to some of the other alternatives that people speculate about or fear. And I would say at this point, I do have to characterize, again, being realistic, clear-eyed, and understanding that there will be impediments and unexpected events along the way. What we have found so far is cooperation, respect, dialogue, and it's not just me. As has been reported in the media, Director Ratcliffe traveled to Caracas and met with leaders there and discussed important items of potential cooperation. I've also discussed, and I think I've alerted some of you, that we have Laura Dogue, who was our ambassador to Nicaragua in the past and to Honduras, will be taking over the Venezuelan Affairs Unit, first in Bogota, but ultimately in Caracas. We've had a team on the ground already there. We already had 70 locally employed that sort of maintain that facility, but we have a team on the ground there assessing it, and we think very quickly we'll be able to open a U.S. diplomatic presence on the ground, which will allow us to have real-time information and interact, by the way, not just with officials in the regime and with the interim authorities, but also interact with members of civil society, the opposition. We think we're going to be much further along when we get them along the way. They've been very cooperative on that front. Obviously, there's some hard asks along the way. We'll see what the response is to those. But whether it's General Kane with his counterpart, or Director Ratcliffe, or myself with Delcy Rodriguez, we've established what I think so far has been a very respectful and productive line of communication as we go through this stabilization phase and towards the recovery phase. But there's a lot of work to be done here. And we ultimately are going to judge actions, not words. And that's what we're hoping to work towards.
Well done, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you. I'm pleased that we are looking at a diplomatic presence in Venezuela in the near future. I think that's very important. But the DEA has reportedly identified Delcy Rodriguez as a significant actor in the drug trade. Do you agree with that? And if you do, how are we to assure the American people that the money that's going to Venezuela is not going to any of the cartels or drug running?
Yeah, and well, first of all, on the first point, I would say she's not indicted the way Maduro and his wife were. So I'm not going to speculate about newspaper articles and what law enforcement is working on. If, in fact, there were such an investigation, that's something that we would speculate on. Suffice it to say that this was not a normal system. We all should stipulate to that, okay? That regime, as everyone understood, was held together by corruption. The glue that kept people together was not loyalty to Maduro. It was the fact that these 5 guys had 5 separate oil fields that were assigned to them. These people had drug routes.
I understand that.
So that's going to be
I'm not defending the regime. In fact, I'm concerned that we haven't really changed the regime enough and that America's dollars are still going to drug runners and to significant organizations who we don't want to have benefit from the funding that we're selling now of oil and providing to the Venezuelan government.
Look, I acknowledge that we are dealing with, I told you, with individuals that have been involved in things that in our system would not be acceptable, would not be acceptable to us in the long term. By no means is our policy to leave in place something permanent that's as corrupt as you've described. We are in the transition and stabilization phase. We are just acknowledging reality, and that is you have to work with the people that are in charge of the elements of government.
Okay, but
now,
what are the reassure people that money is not continuing to go to the drug cartels?
Right, so that's the process that I outlined to you. So on the sanctioned oil, the oil that requires U.S. permission to move, that oil, the proceeds of that oil, which, by the way, is being sold at market price, not at the discount Venezuela was being forced to sell, is being deposited into an account that ultimately will become a U.S. Treasury blocked account here in the United States. They will submit, we will, at the front end, say this is what this money can be spent on these things. We will submit to them, they will submit to us a budget request. We want to use this money for these things. And part of the proceeds will go to fund a audit process to make sure that that's how the money is being spent. So and that's how we intend to handle those funds in the short term.
There's an actual audit process that's been set up? Who is
It will be set up, and we have a couple options. One option is the XM Bank. They have expertise as bankers and being able to do some of that option. There may be some others in place. We haven't finalized what that audit process would be. We've only made one payment And that payment we did, and retrospectively will be audited, but it was important we made that payment because they had to meet payroll. They had to keep sanitation workers, police officers, government workers on staff. It was a $300 million payment.
Right. So it's been reported that the oil sold for $500 million, that $300 million went to Venezuelan government. What happened to the other $200 million?
It's still sitting in the account, is my understanding at this time.
The account in Qatar?
Well, the account, yes, but that will ultimately be that's a short-term account. Ultimately, it will be a U.S. Treasury blocked account in the United States.
And will it also be audited?
Correct. Well, the audit will be on the expenditures. At the front end, we'll tell them this is what the money can be spent on. Again, I'm not talking about all the other revenues the Venezuelan government may have. We're talking about the revenues from the sanctioned oil. At the front end, we will say this is what the allowable expenses are, and then they will agree to fund, as part of the overall cost, they will pay for and fund an audit system acceptable to us to ensure that that's how the money was spent.
And can you report to this committee once that audit system is set up?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'd like to change the topic in my short time that I have left, because when you were a member of this committee, you authored legislation to prevent President Trump from unilaterally leaving NATO, you and Senator Kaine. Do you still believe that the U.S. benefits from NATO?
We do. I mean, the problem but NATO needs to be reimagined as well in terms of the obligations. And this is not new to this president. Multiple presidents have complained about it.
I agree.
I think this president just complains about it louder than other presidents.
Well, I'm just trying to be get a clear answer on where this administration stands relative to NATO, because it's been a very fuzzy message over the last year. And do you agree that we're stronger in confronting China when we do so with like-minded partners, and that China is still the #1 threat that we face in the United States?
Yeah, but our like-minded partners have to have capability, and that's been part of the problem, is the erosion in European defense capabilities, because they've taken vast amount of the monies that these are rich countries. And because of the NATO umbrella, it gave them the flexibility to spend a tremendous amount of their revenues on social programs and not on defense. Now, maybe that trend line will begin to change.
Well, it's already begun to change, frankly, and thanks. And I think the president deserves credit for that, for the fact that there is now a commitment for 5% of GDP to be spent on defense. But part of that strength also comes not just from having the mechanism, the military might, but it also comes from the unity with our allies. And to the extent to which that unity is undermined, like the talk about Greenland and antagonizing Denmark, then it undermines NATO's ability. And the only people who are excited about that are Vladimir Putin and President Xi.
Yeah, well, I would say that I think our alliances in NATO ultimately are something that's going to work out. Our partners understand the importance of the U.S. presence in NATO. Without the U.S., there is no NATO. And we understand that in order for NATO to be stronger, our partners need to be stronger. And one of the things we've explained to our allies in NATO is the United States is not simply focused on Europe. We also have defense needs in the Western Hemisphere. We have defense needs in the Indo-Pacific. And it will require us. We may be the richest country in the world, but we don't have unlimited resources. And as we reassign
exactly why we want to have allies and partners to help us as we're looking at conflicts around the world. And when we antagonize our allies and partners, and when we send Canada to do a trade deal with China instead of coming to New Hampshire or the United States, it weakens our ability to confront our adversaries.
Yeah, but our allies have to be two things. They have to be willing to step up, but they also have to be capable of stepping up. And frankly, many of them have not. I mean, Spain is still not doing the 5%. I mean, there are countries that are still not doing. And in fact, Marco Rubio yesterday pointed out that without the United States, the countries of Europe would have to spend 10% of their GDP for the next 20 years to be able to make up the whole. So I do think there needs to be a rebalancing, and hopefully we'll have cooperation. I think we will. Rute has done a great job of managing all.
And I'm not arguing that point with you. As I said, I agree with what the president has asked of our European allies. What I'm arguing with you about is that his rhetoric is undermining NATO and our partnerships with our allies, and that's a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary Rubio, for being here. So some of the comments from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are difficult to square with the record. The goalposts didn't move, nor did Maduro change. The only thing that changed was President Trump acted on what members of both parties said needed to happen. And did so, by the way, with an operation that will go down in history as one of the most impressive and tactically proficient to be ever carried out. So, Secretary Rubio, I'd like to get your response to a few yes or no questions. I know that's typically not your nature, but please bear with me here a moment, okay?
All right, let's hear them first. I hate game shows. Go ahead.
For years, the United States had a standing bounty on Nicolas Maduro, correct?
Have what, I'm sorry?
A standing bounty on Nicolas Maduro.
Oh, yes.
And this bounty was increased by both the Biden and Trump administrations, correct?
Correct.
And despite that bounty, did Maduro remain in power?
Yes.
Did he continue to support drug traffickers?
Oh, yes.
Was Operation Absolute Resolve a law enforcement operation supported by the military?
It was.
Did that operation successfully remove Maduro and his wife, and they were taken into custody?
Yes. Great questions.
Thanks. Were any service members, law enforcement officers killed in that operation?
Not any of ours.
None of ours, right. Has there largely been a broad support across Latin America for Maduro's removal?
Yes.
And is the United States better off with Nicolas Maduro in custody?
Yes, and Venezuela too.
Right. I realize that you'll hear differing views during this hearing, but I want to at least offer my personal congratulations to you and everybody who helped carry this out, because the world is better off without Nicolas Maduro. A few weeks ago, you briefed the Senate on your three-phase plan. You've been talking about it here today on stabilization, recovery, and the transition in Venezuela. Is there anything this Congress can do to be helpful in executing on that plan?
There will be in time, there's no doubt about it. On the stabilization front, in order to stabilize it, for example, we're going to have to begin to provide some licenses through OFAC. So as an example, if a company wants to go down and explore the opportunity to do some economic activity in Venezuela, they will require a license from Treasury to be able to do that. And so that doesn't require congressional action, but I wanted you to be aware of it when you start to see some of these things. Some of these are just exploratory. The second is, I think in time, look, Venezuela is a very wealthy country. This is not a country that's going to require money from the United States to rebuild, to stabilize, to transition. It really isn't. It has the ability to be, and it has been historically, the wealthiest country in the Western in Latin and South America, in many cases. The problem is that the wealth of the country was being stolen. And so part of both the recovery and the transition phase is ensuring that you leave in place a prosperous, free, democratic, allied with the United States and friendly, but also prosperous Venezuela, where the resources of the country are being done responsibly, are being utilized responsibly and to the benefit of the people and their economy. So in time, I imagine we will be coming back to you with specific legislation that may be required to assist in that function. But we don't expect that this is going to require any spending on our part. On the contrary, unlike many of the other parts of the world we've gotten involved, Venezuela we're not spending any money in Venezuela right now other than whatever it costs to stand up our embassy.
Let me switch gears on you a little bit. One of the common criticisms after Maduro's capture was that this would incentivize communist China to take similar actions in Taiwan. In my opinion, this couldn't be further from the truth. For starters, communist China doesn't care about international law or norms. They've demonstrated that repeatedly. Just ask the Philippines. Nor does it believe in international law, even applies to Taiwan. But most importantly, Xi Jinping's calculus on whether to take kinetic action against Taiwan rests solely on whether or not he believes he will be successful or not. In this sense, the tactical proficiency displayed during Operation Absolute Resolve may have actually given Xi more pause to take than in taking action in Taiwan. Because despite its massive military buildup, the PLA continues to lack the experience so clearly on display that the United States demonstrated in Maduro's capture. And the PLA leaders that do have combat experience, like General Zhang, just got purged, or at least one of them did. So, Secretary Rubio, do you believe that the operation to take Maduro into custody will have any impact on Communist China's actions or intentions toward Taiwan?
No. Look, the situation on Taiwan is a Xi legacy project that he's made very clear that that's what he intends to do. And that's going to be irrespective of anything that happens in the world. Your point, though, is well taken, and that is the U.S. in conducting this operation, I think, was certainly startling to China, to Russia, to Iran, to any adversary around the world, because the U.S. is the only country in the world that could have done this operation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just real briefly, I just mentioned General Zhang getting purged here. He was obviously a very important official in China. Can you share with us just your assessment on what that means that she just purged one of these?
Well, this is, I think, part of a pattern we've seen over the last few years, which is a purge of leaders in their military. They're spending a lot of money on their military, and obviously some of these guys are stealing that money, and they're trying to address that. So it's an issue internally in their system. They're obviously not sharing with us or talking to us in depth about any of that, but it's certainly something we watch with interest.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ricketts. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Good to be with you again. My basic question is, what are we doing here? What is the point? What is the goal of this hearing?
How do I know?
As you know well, having served on this dais alongside me for 14 years, this is an oversight hearing. And the point, the purpose of oversight is to encourage, if necessary, to compel consultation between the administration and Congress. And I just wanted to raise with you at the outset, of course, the Commander-in-Chief has, under Article 2, the power to defend the American people against an imminent threat or an incoming attack. How else could we be kept safe? But our Article 1 power requires consultation. I'll agree with all of my colleagues. Nicolas Maduro is a bad guy. He was indicted. There was a bounty on his head over several administrations. His removal, flawlessly executed by American troops, thankfully none of them hurt, did cost the lives of 75 to 100 Venezuelans and Cubans, was a dangerous and high-risk maneuver. I am glad that it ended as well as it possibly could. But the point here that I want to make first is that it was rehearsed for months. The administration had a number of contingencies it was trying to navigate through. But over the course of months, when the administration was taking strike after strike after strike against drug trafficking boats, in several instances where senior leaders of the administration briefed this committee and others, we were told that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table, that the campaign to try and deter drug trafficking was not going to include the exact military action that followed. Yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have, it's a got to have. And look, the chairman opened by saying that this was limited in scope and duration, that it was executed flawlessly, and we should all be happy about the result. That much I agree with. But our president continues to threaten Delcy Rodriguez and the remnant of the Maduro regime with military force if they don't comply. We should know, what are the policies, what is the path, what is the plan forward? You and I both know the long and painful history of wars that began and seemed to be resolved and then opened up into excruciating, expensive, years-long conflicts. In Iraq in particular, in Libya and elsewhere, things do not always go as planned. And so consultation with Congress that is truthful and forthcoming and transparent is critical. In your service in this body, you knew that, you experienced it. I was in the room as you held to account members of previous administrations for not coming forward as they should have. So look, in order to avoid our men and women in our armed forces going into harm's way, doubting whether they have the support of the Congress, consultation, hearings, and deliberations are required. I understand the risk of leaks. That's a risk every administration takes. But at the end of the day, our framers entrusted the power of the declaration of war to this body, not to the executive. And where there is the time to consult, there has to be consultation. Second, I just wanted to talk about allies and alliances. I was just in Europe. I led a bipartisan delegation, as Senator Shaheen referenced, to Denmark. And our president's comments about NATO, about Denmark, and his attempts to coerce Denmark into giving up Greenland are appalling. They profoundly harmed our security. And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to NATO. I was concerned that you just said NATO needs to be reimagined. Let's just be clear about the record. You know as well as I, Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was in defense of us after we were attacked. Danes and soldiers from almost every other NATO ally deployed and served, fought and died. 52 days. And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president says we never asked for anything from NATO, and they never gave us anything, and you suggest that they aren't carrying their weight, whether it's in bases, or in access, or in troops, or in service, it is allies that will keep us safe in the Indo-Pacific. Our treaty allies, Korea and Japan and Australia and the Philippines, are going to be critical to Indo-Pacific security against our principal threat, China, and in Europe. I'm worried that the very foundations of trust are being shaken. Our democracy depends on consultation with Congress that is truthful and timely, and the confidence of our allies depends on them knowing where we're going next. Today, an armada is steaming towards Iran. Our president is on social media threatening Iran, and I hope I can count on you, Mr. Secretary, to consult with us and inform us before our next actions, whether against Nigeria, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, or anywhere else. And I hope and believe that I can count on you to reinforce the sanctity of NATO, not to reimagine it, but to reinforce it.
Thank you. Well, let me unpack the 3 points you touched upon: consultation, NATO, Greenland, alliances in Greenland. Let me tell you on the consultation. Look, this has been a point of tension, not just in this administration and Congress, but in multiple administrations. As you rightly pointed out, I was a big fan of consultation when I was sitting over there. Now, you know, it's a different job, different time. But it's not, that's not necessarily the point. This is a very unique situation that we faced here. The fact of the matter is that our mission, and the one you were briefed on and talked about, that mission remains ongoing, and that is the counter-narcotic mission that we continue to carry out. As controversial as it may be, you may not all be fans of it, obviously, but it is happening in the Eastern Pacific, and it is also happening in the Caribbean Basin. The problem is, or the good news is, there aren't a lot of drug boats moving in the Caribbean Basin anymore, and that's what we had briefed Congress upon. This specific mission that you've talked about, one of the reasons why you rehearse it is to see if it's even feasible, to basically go to the president and say, is this something that's even an option on the table? The truth of the matter is that this mission could not have been briefed to Congress because it wasn't even in the realm of possible until very late in December, when all of our efforts to negotiate with Maduro had failed, and the president was finally presented these options and made these decisions. It was also a trigger-based operation. It may never have happened. It required a number of factors to all align at the right place at the right time in a very limited window, and it wasn't even clear if it was ever going to be possible. There's also the aspect which I do not control, and that is deference to the Department of War on operational security. Despite the fact that we had kept this quite constrained, the truth of the matter is that this was leaked. We now know it was leaked by a contractor at the Department of War that, had it been published, would have endangered the lives of people and/or would have probably canceled the ability to carry out the mission. So this is a real tension, and one that I'm doing the best I can to try to manage within the constraints of two things: operational security and also decisions being made. There are multiple contingencies for events all over the world, including some that none of us think were ever going to come to fruition. And in this particular case, one of the reasons why you rehearse these things in advance is to know whether it's even possible. Is this even doable? And what are the risks associated with doing? So you can present options to the president, who ultimately makes these decisions. In the case of reimagining NATO, it most certainly has to be reimagined. And the reason why it has to be reimagined is not because its purpose is reimagined. Its capabilities have to be reimagined. Let me give you as a point of example. There's a lot of talk about security guarantees. And it's something that there's general agreement about now with the case of Ukraine. But those security guarantees basically involve the deployment of a handful of European troops, primarily French in the UK, and then a U.S. backstop. But in fact, the security guarantee is the U.S. backstop. It is not and I'm not diminishing the fact that some countries in Europe are willing to place troops in a post-war Ukraine. What I'm pointing out is that is irrelevant without the U.S. backstop. And the reason why you need such a strong U.S. backstop is because our allies and our partners have not invested enough in their own defense capabilities over the last 20 or 30 years. Now, hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully that is changing. And in some cases and in some particular countries, it's already changed. But this is a fact that we cannot ignore. NATO is going to be stronger if our allies are more capable, especially, and here's the reality, whether we want to accept it or not, we have interests all over the world. We have interests in the Middle East, we have interests in the Western Hemisphere, and we most certainly have interests in the Indo-Pacific. A number of you have already pointed out that China is the chief challenge. We can't have the same soldiers or the same ships in both Europe and in the Indo-Pacific. We have to pick. No matter how many ships we build, no matter how many capabilities we grow, we're going to have to make these adjustments. And the stronger our partners are in NATO, the more flexibility the United States will have to secure our interests in different parts of the world. That's not an abandonment of NATO. That is a reality of the 21st century and the world that's changing now. In the case of Greenland, I'll say we're in a good place right now. We had excellent meetings with the Secretary General of NATO. In fact, even as I speak to you now, there'll be some technical level meetings between us and our partners in Greenland and Denmark on this issue. And I think we have in place a process that's going to bring us to a good outcome for everybody. The president's interest on Greenland has been clear. It's a national security interest. It's a long-standing interest that predate this administration. It's one that our allies acknowledge is real. I think we're going to get something positive done. We're going to begin that process in a very professional, straightforward way. It begins today, and it'll be a regular process. We're going to try to do it in a way that isn't like a media circus every time these conversations happen, because we think that creates more flexibility on both sides to arrive at a positive outcome. And I think we're going to get there. And I thought it was noteworthy and important that despite your concerns, the president at his speech in Davos made very clear that the United States was not going to use force or military force in Greenland. So I think we're going to wind up in a good place. We got a little bit of work to do, but I think we're going to wind up in a good place. And I think you'll hear the same from our colleagues in Europe very shortly.
Mr. Secretary, the Gang of Eight has never leaked.
Senator,
It is critical that you consult with Congress. For us to be safe, our allies have to trust us. And for this committee to do our work, we have to trust you. Let's work together to restore that.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Senator McCormick.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Defending American interests in the face of Russian, Iranian, and Chinese encroachment in the Western Hemisphere is a key to the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine. But Venezuela's new interim leader, in her public commentary at least, defends their ties to Russia, Iran, and the PRC, and had said this week had enough of U.S. interference. So beyond the oil leverage, which you talked about in your testimony, what steps is the administration taking to demand from the interim government to put incentives in place to ensure that they prevent malign actors, foreign terror organizations, and so forth from continuing to have influence and safe haven in Venezuela?
Yeah, it's I mean, yes, there's leverage. And I wouldn't just say oil. I think anything that's sanctioned in Venezuela, will, in order for them to normalize it, will require cooperation with the United States. But it's not just leverage. It's also their national interest. It's an alignment of their interest. The truth of the matter is that the United States will be a far better partner for a future Venezuelan government that's free and democratic, and even for the current authorities, than some of the partners they've signed up with now. Frankly, we think it's not in Venezuela's interest to have an Iranian presence or the sale of Iranian weaponry or anything like that into their country. So I think there's alignment there. We think and can argue that some of these criminal elements, which they've allowed to act with impunity in parts of their country, is a deal with the devil. In the short term, it provided revenues to some corrupt regime officials, but in the long term has created real destabilization, not for just them, by the way, but also for Colombia. Just understand something. The FARC dissidents and the ELN operate with impunity from Venezuelan territory. They control Venezuelan territory.
Yeah.
And some of that was through deals with individuals aligned with the regime because they made money off of that. But we don't think that's in the long-term interest.
Do they agree?
And what's been expressed to us by leaders of the interim authorities is that they agree. And now we're going to test it.
Despite the public commentary, there's a recognition, you think, and progress.
Look, we all have politics.
Yeah.
Even in places like that. Suffice it to say what I've said from the very beginning, and that is we are going to judge based on actions, not words. And that's going both ways. You can tell us you're going to do all these great things. If you don't do them, you didn't do them. Or you can say, I'm not going to do these great things, but if you do them, you did them.
Good.
And I think we can point to some things now that show you, just as an example. Think about it. Within 2.5 weeks of Maduro's removal, they passed reforms to the hydrocarbon laws, which basically roll back many of the Chavez-era restrictions on private ownership and investment in their country. It doesn't go far enough. It probably needs to do more, but that's extraordinary. That never would have happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. It certainly wouldn't have happened if Maduro was still there. So I think these are signs of progress. Do they still have political prisoners? They do. But many are increasingly being released every single day, and some are actually being released and beginning to speak out again. And we're going to watch very closely how they're treated and how that happens, because that'll be part of how we judge them and their actions.
You touched on my second question, which is this long history of very sordid history for outside investors coming into Venezuela. And the president and you had a meeting with our energy leaders in the Oval Office to talk about the opportunity to invest. And there was, worries about the safety of investing. What steps beyond what you just described in terms of the hydrocarbon law, security guarantees for workers, any sorts of certainty that investors are gaining, which is going to allow them to have the confidence to move on the opportunities of Venezuela?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is some of these investors or potential investors need to get a license from OFAC to be able to even explore this. Then they need to be able to go down there and meet with people and see what's happening and make that determination. Here's what I would say. Venezuela has a lot of oil. They do. But there's a lot of oil in other places too. Companies are only going to invest somewhere if they know we're going to invest, we're going to make our money back with a profit, and our land isn't going to be taken from us. And if you try to, there's a court we can go to and contracts we can enforce. That's the level of certainty that we're talking in terms of security. And that's part of this transition process. That's part of this recovery process, is to normalize their industry. Because if not, they'll just invest the money in Guyana, or they'll just invest the money in some other part of the world that has oil. They're not going to risk it. So it's to their benefit to have set up a normal, transparent process that encourages foreign investment, not just in oil, by the way, and other natural resources, but in other sectors of their economy. I mean, it's unlimited, whether it's retail, whether it's banking. I mean, a country that's prosperous and generating economic activity holds the promise of all sorts of economic activity.
I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question, if I could, just in my remaining seconds. Just very briefly, we've heard such differing accounts, and the president has spoken strongly, you have as well, on the deaths in Iran and the horrible atrocities that are being committed. Can you give us some sense of, we see reports of thousands, tens of thousands. What's the State Department's best estimate of what's happened on the ground?
Well, in the thousands for certain. And look, I think regimes, including that one in Iran, have learned that when you start shooting people in the head with snipers, it's effective. I mean, it works, and they've done it, and it's horrifying. And that's what we've seen. That regime is probably weaker than it has ever been. And the core problem they face, unlike the protests you saw in the past on some other topics, is that they don't have a way to address the core complaints of the protesters, which is that their economy is in collapse. And the reason why there's economies in collapse is because they spend all their money and all their resources building weapons and sponsoring terrorist groups around the world instead of reinvesting it back into their society. And as a result, have taken on massive global sanctions, which has isolated their economy and their country. And so that's what the Iranian people are demanding, is that they stop doing that and start caring about them and get these sanctions off them. And this regime is unwilling to do it. So the core challenge is the protests may have ebbed, but they will spark up again in the future, because this regime, unless they are willing to change and or leave, have no way of addressing the legitimate and consistent complaints of the people of Iran who deserve better.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Listen, I think the scope of the project that you are undertaking in Venezuela is without precedent. You are taking their oil at gunpoint. You are holding and selling that oil, putting for now the receipts in an offshore Middle Eastern account. You're deciding how and for what purposes that money is going to be used in a country of 30 million people. I think a lot of us believe that that is destined for failure. And I know that you're telling us today just to be patient, but a month later, we have no information on a timetable for a democratic transition. Maduro's people are still in charge. Most of the political prisoners are in jail. And by the way, those that have been let out have a gag order on them from the government. The opposition leader is still in exile. This looks already like it is a failure. You say you're in serious talks, but as you note, the Venezuelans are great at being in serious talks. They almost never deliver. So I'm just going to give you my three questions and hope that you'll answer them, because I do think we want to try to understand how to judge the efficacy of this as time goes on, because I worry you won't be back before this committee anytime soon, and to understand whether this is just facilitating corruption, both in Venezuela and here at home. So here are my three questions. First, reports are that you've given no-bid licenses to two companies to sell Venezuela's oil. One of them is a massive donor to the president. To many Americans, that reeks. And so my question is, can you commit that partners for future sales are going to be chosen through a fair, open selection process? Second, if Delcy Rodriguez, who is an unelected leader, the head of Maduro's torture operation, is still in power 6 months from now, does that mean that your policy is a success or failure? How do we judge when we've had enough of Rodriguez? And third, in your testimony, you reserved the right to use force again in the future if the Venezuelan government isn't complying with your requests. So if, for instance, they refused to give you access to the oil in the future, if they said, we're just going to keep it for ourselves, would this cause you to consider military action? And do you concede that if you're using military action simply to try to compel cooperation from the government, you absolutely need congressional authorization for that? So if you can answer those three questions.
So the first question was about the trading companies. The second is about Delcy still in power 6 months from now.
6 months from now.
And the third is on the use of force.
Yes.
Okay. On the first one, the two traders. So here's the problem we faced. The problem we face in the short term is they had no place to put oil. They were running out of storage capacity for their oil. We had to move that oil to market very quickly. The only way to move it to market very quickly is to plug into these two primary trade companies that could sell it in the open market. That is not the permanent outcome here. That is a short-term fix to a short-term problem, which is they were literally storing oil. They brought in tankers and had tankers sitting offshore just to hold their oil. At some point, their capacity to produce was going to be shut down and their ability to generate revenue. So we had to move that oil very quickly. The long-term plan is not those two trading companies. The long-term plan is for them to have a normal energy program that sells directly into the market, directly to refineries and to companies that are exploiting and exploring it. For example, Chevron has operations there that never stopped. They seek to expand those operations. They don't need those trading companies. So those trading companies were a short-term fix for a very acute problem because we wanted to prevent societal collapse because they had no money for revenue. On the second point about her being still in power, look, let me say this, a couple things. This is not unprecedented. I can point to a number of places, Spain, Paraguay, two examples of places in which there was a transition, from an autocratic regime to a democratic regime, and it took time. I can't give you a timeline of how long it takes. It can't take forever. It's not even been 4 weeks since Maduro was reduced.
A year, two
Well, I think
years?
we need to be, let me put it to you this way, we need to be much further along 6 months from now, even 3 months from now. That may not be satisfactory to you, but I'm saying we have to be much further along 3, 4, 5 months. 3 or 4, 5 months from now cannot look like what today looks like. And I think there's acknowledgement on both sides of that. I can probably give you a better answer, and this is not deflecting, when we finally have people on the ground like the ambassador and the team around her on a daily basis that are interacting. Because one thing is for me to pick up the phone and talk to Delcy Rodriguez 3 times a week. Another thing is to have someone on the ground on a daily basis that's following these events, is talking to civil society, but also engaging with interim authorities. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, we want to see quick progress. As you said, it's unprecedented, okay? All I'm saying to you is, before this was stagnant. Before this, we had spent 14 years, you were involved in some of those efforts, 14 years trying to change the dynamic in Venezuela. 13, 12, 11, 10, it was a big part of my career in the Senate was spent on this. This is the first time in over a decade that we see even the glimmer of an opportunity to change conditions. A lot of that will depend on us, but a lot of that will depend on them. And it also will depend on the rest of Venezuelan society. How quickly can we get all these Venezuelans that want to go back to Venezuela and participate in civic and economic life back to Venezuela? That's going to be critical here. We recognize that. So yes, we have to be much further along in 6 months. We expect to be further along. And if we're not, I'll tell you, we'll tell you. On the third point of use of force, look, the president never rules out his options as commander-in-chief to protect the national interest of the United States. I can tell you right now with full certainty, we are not postured to, nor do we intend or expect to have to take any military action in Venezuela at any time. The only military presence you'll see in Venezuela is our Marine Guards at an embassy. Okay, that is our goal, that is our expectation, and that is what everything that outlines towards.
But
that said, if an Iranian drone factory pops up and threatens our forces in the region, the president retains the option to eliminate that threat.
I'm asking a more specific question because in your testimony, you suggest that you would use force to compel cooperation, for instance, with oil sales. Do you agree that you have to come to Congress to get authorization if you are simply using force to try to compel cooperation?
Well, there's two things. There's the
it seems like
under the War Powers Act. No, under the War Powers Act, if we're going to be involved in something that's going to put us involved in a sustained way, we have to notify you within 48 hours after the fact, and then if it's going to last longer than 60 days, we have to come to Congress with it. We don't anticipate either of these things having to happen. Everything is moving in a very different trajectory right now. On the other hand, if we tell them we don't want to see drones from Iran, as an example, pointed at the United States or threatening our forces or our presence in the region or our allies' presence in the region, and they refuse to comply with that, the president does reserve the option in self-defense to eliminate that threat. We don't see that, we don't anticipate it, but it could happen. But we hope not. We don't want it to happen. On the contrary, if we had to take military action, it would set us back on all these other things that we're talking about. I can tell you military action is not good for, recovery and transition. That's not what we hope to see. It's certainly not our goal here. But a lot of that will depend on them. But I think it would require the emergence of an imminent threat of the kind that we do not anticipate at this time. But that's not, they get a vote on that too.
Senator Brasso.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to see you. Congratulations. What you and President Trump have demonstrated in the past year is clearly peace through strength, and I appreciate the leadership from both of you. We've been talking a lot about Venezuelan oil. You know, I focus a lot on energy going to China, and 3/4 of all the oil that went from Venezuela out of the country there last year, 75% of it went to China. They got it at deep discounts. Lots of money back to Venezuela through oil for loan deals. Since the start of this blockade, basically Venezuela crude shipments to China have fallen dramatically. Can you assess or talk a little bit about the impact this has on China's broader energy strategy?
Just to be clear, it's a quarantine, not a blockade. A blockade is an act of war. It's a quarantine, and it's been very effective in the sense that it's given us this leverage. In fact, can I just add something?
We've been watching U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testify at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing about U.S. policy toward Venezuela. While both sides of the aisle agreed on the evils of Maduro, the questioning was quite partisan, with Rubio pressed over Trump's relations with our allies, such as NATO and the audit processes set up to account for Venezuelan oil revenue not going to the corrupt regime the U.S. seeks to remove. And he looked to thread the needle in the bipartisan nature of the evils of Nicolas Maduro, and that the U.S. administration is progressing in Venezuela despite the challenges that lie ahead. And next, President Trump is now speaking at a high-profile summit in Washington, D.C. to launch a new savings program called Trump Accounts. Take a listen.
All right, let's get down to business. That's enough of that. But how good is Lee Greenwood? He was with us right from the beginning. First time I walked onto the stage, I heard that song. I liked it. I said, let's use it. That was 10 years ago, and he's been with us all the way. Fantastic guy. There's never been a man that made so much money from one song ever, and I'm happy about it. But I'm delighted to be back in the beautiful Mellon Auditorium, a wonderful family. Tim Mellon is a great guy. He's the current version of the Mellons, a fantastic person. To celebrate a thrilling new milestone for America, the first generation of Trump account children. Trump account children. For the first time ever, we're going to give every newborn American child a financial stake in the future, head start at life, and a fair shot at the American dream, something people don't talk about so much, at least not for the last 4 years they haven't been, but now they're talking about it big. This last period of time, it's been unbelievable. You see what's going on with our economy, the tremendous investments that's been made in our country. We have over $18 trillion coming in. The most, I think, was 3. That was 10 years ago, another country, not even our country. We have $18 trillion, and we have thousands of businesses being built all over the country, and hundreds of massive plants, so big, car plants, AI plants. With the support of the men and women here, and this beautiful room, over the next 15 years, we're going to put $3 to $4 trillion of wealth into the hands of young Americans who otherwise would have really started out with nothing. It's really an amazing thing because it gives young children that start out with really nothing, and we gives them, boy, it's more money than anybody could imagine. From their standpoint, they'll have a real start in life, and that's why decades from now, I believe the Trump accounts will be remembered as one of the most transformative policy innovations of all time. And I've done a lot of them. The tax cuts, we've done a lot of them, more than I think anybody. And I think this is going to be one of the most outstanding. Last summer, I signed the great big beautiful bill delivering. It made this possible, too. It actually made this possible. Without it, we wouldn't have been able to do this. Delivering the largest tax cuts in American history, including no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. And, you know, we did another thing. When you buy a car now, you get a deduction on the interest payment if you borrow money. So think of it. Rich people get so many deductions. I'm the king of deductions. I love deductions. But people, middle-income people, never had a deduction before. Now they're getting a deduction on interest. They buy a car. That's going to have a huge impact on the automobile. By the way, there's one proviso. It has to be made in America. If the car's made in another country, no thank you. But they're all going to be made in America pretty soon because we have factories coming in from Canada, Mexico, Japan, Germany, all over Europe. They're all coming here to make their cars because they don't want to pay tariffs. Very simple. It wasn't very complicated. You'll see those numbers starting to produce. That's why you see these massive construction numbers. And soon, when those things start opening, you're going to see employment and you're going to see wealth creation for middle-income people like you've never seen before. Every single Democrat in Congress voted to raise taxes on hardworking citizens. Their whole campaign was raise taxes. I've never heard of it before. All my life I grew up, and I hear politicians, we will cut taxes. This is the only group I've ever seen, we're going to raise your taxes. No wonder they lost. Actually, there were other reasons also. But together with the majorities in the House and Senate, we overcame their obstruction, and we put more money into the pockets of every working American than anyone thought even imaginable. Perhaps no provision of the great big beautiful bill will prove more consequential than Trump accounts. Under this program, the U.S. government will automatically create a tax-free investment account for every newborn American child, something that nobody really would have even thought of. There were some brilliant people that thought of it for a long time. They're here with us today. We're going to introduce a couple of them. But nobody really, I mean, I've had friends that the top people in business, they came up to me, whose idea was this? This is great. They said, I never thought of that. We'll fund those personal accounts with a seed contribution of $1,000, which will compound and grow over the course of their lives and could grow into very, very substantial numbers. Parents, employers, churches, states, and loved ones will also be able to add up to $5,000 in additional money for those accounts. And with every modest contribution, Trump accounts should reach at least $50,000 in value by the time the child turns 18, and could be very substantially more than that. With slightly greater contributions, the typical account will grow to $100,000, $200,000. It can even grow up to past $300,000 per child. And we think the most likely case is in the $200,000, $300,000 range. The size and scale of this wealth will dwarf all government programs ever created to benefit America's youth. There's never been anything like this. That's why everybody's talking about it. Even really people that truly hate me are making this investment. One person hates my guts. He put $1 billion into it. I said, you must like this program a lot because you can't stand me. I said, I do, but I do like you more than you think. They liked me more in the last year than they liked me before. Although we had a great first term, we can't forget that. We are the greatest economy in the history of our country, but this is blowing it away. So Every president, thank you. Every president in modern history has left our children with nothing but debt. But under this administration, we're going to leave every child with real assets and a shot at financial freedom. We'll ensure that Americans don't just end their lives with a nest egg, but instead all Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg. There's never been anything quite like this. I want to express my tremendous gratitude to a very special couple who believed so strongly in this vision right from the beginning that they personally donated $6.25 billion. That's $6,250,000,000. Even the 250 is a lot of money when you think. I mean, you know, Nikki, do you hear that money? That's big even compared to rapping, all the money she makes. She's hearing a number like that. She'll say, how many songs do I have to make to catch that? But amazing, amazing thing, $6,250,000,000 to fund Trump accounts for an additional 25 million children aged 10 and under. And that's Michael and Susan Dell, two incredible people. Where are you, Michael? Where's Michael? Stand up, Michael. What a great guy. What a great guy. You know, I tell you, he didn't do it for his business. He did it, I guess, probably would have been better off not to. That's a lot. But you know what? I hope everybody goes out and buys Dell computers. My son, I told you, Barron, he loves that computer. I don't know what the hell you're doing to it, but he likes it. But I just want to thank you very much, and Susan. It's unbelievable, really unbelievable what you've done. So Michael and Susan made this donation in recognition of America's 250th anniversary because there's no better way to honor America's history than to invest in America's future. That's what they did. And this is perhaps the largest, one of the largest certainly, but perhaps the largest private donations of all time. That's a lot, $6,250,000,000. And somebody did say that. A friend of mine, very rich, he's going to put up $100 million. And he said, geez, you know, think of it, the 250 that Michael has is a lot more than mine. And I haven't even talked about the $6 billion. But anyway, it's amazing when Michael can start off with very little money and build a fortune where he can, you know, routinely make such a payment and investment in the youth of our country. Michael, you're great. Thank you, man. Thank you. And I also want to say hello to and thank some very special people that have been with my administration and really become friends of mine. On occasion, I have little arguments, but generally, I would say really good. And who's doing, and start off with a man who's doing a phenomenal job, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Scott, thank you very much, Scott. And he loved this right from the beginning, Scott, right? He saw this and he said, wow, what a great idea that is. This is, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time they reach 18, but we can go 21. They can keep it in longer. But he saw this right from the beginning. He said, wow, this is great. And we have some other ideas that will be great, but this was one that just hit everybody. This was an easy one to think about. And again, that bill allowed us to do this. Otherwise, can you imagine trying to get this approved by Democrats and Republicans? Let's get together. We got it done. Also, a man who's made your life much easier because those of you that are building plants and equipment so you can give your money, ultimately you're giving your money away anyway, no matter how much you make. But he's made it a lot easier. You know, approvals for big plants used to take 20 years, 25 years, and then you'd get rejected, actually. You'd go 20 years environmentally and they'd reject you. You finally, if I think of it, a guy starts young, he starts an approval process. By the time he's middle-aged, they take a vote and he loses. It's not worth it. But we have a man that's getting these things done in a matter of weeks. And the biggest plants in the world are being built right now, and he's getting them done fast. He's getting electric plants built so that we can buy them. They're paying for them. They want to pay for them. So they can open up their AI plants and they can open up their automobile plants, and lesser so. The automobiles, believe it or not, take much less electricity. You're going to have to tell me why you need so much electricity to create information. I said, what's your primary product? Information. Oh, I see. information. It better be damn good information for the kind of money. But Lee Zeldin is a star, and he has been incredible. Thank you, Lee. And, I have to say this, Scott and I were talking about it. So Lee went out to California after the fire, which should have never happened if they would have let the water flow from the Pacific Northwest, which everybody's been telling them, including me. Now I just opened it up. We literally sent in the military to open it up. But if they would have let, you wouldn't have had the fires, because you would have had a little thing called the old-fashioned way, water in the fire hydrants, as opposed to empty fire hydrants. You would have had water, and most of the houses had the sprinklers on top. No, there was no water in their sprinkler in their living room. All those fires wouldn't have started. But they did start, and I will say that Lee, the most difficult permit was Lee. I went there a couple of days after the fire, met so many people on the streets who were, in many cases, fairly wealthy people, some very rich people. Some of the best houses in California burned down. And I said to him, so what do you want to do? They said, sir, we want to start immediately. Well, we'll get you permits. Now, the hardest permit, Lee, was the federal permit. Is that right? He got everything done in 20 days, right? The whole thing? Is that a correct statement or less? 20 days. So he got everything done, 100% ready to go. And I went for a meeting, and this mayor, who's a grossly incompetent person, she said, we're going to try and have the permits done within 2 years. Remember that? I got into an argument. I said, you mean within 2 days, right? She said, no. And I'm meeting all these people as I'm walking along the streets with the fire departments and the policemen, and they're all devastated. They're still smoldering. They weren't even allowed to go in their property. The Environmental Protection Agency local said, don't go on your property, okay? We said, it's okay, don't worry about it. Any problem is gone. Any problem is burned. Any germs are burned. They're burned. They were burned. Nobody's ever seen anything like it, but all so unnecessary that it happened. But we got it all done in 20 days, the whole place. And yet now, still, more than a year later, they don't have permits. Almost nobody is building. So I haven't told this to Lee Zeldin yet, but I'm going to put you in charge of getting permits. I think we're going to override the local authorities because they're never going to have it. And when I was told that there's a provision where you can override the local authority to get things done, because it's really, to me, it's a national emergency. What they've done to these people is horrible. It's just horrible. And they'll still vote Democrat. Can you believe it? After all, they get used to it. Although I must say we converted many. We'll probably convert a lot more. But I just want them to get into their houses. And I don't want a big section of the area built into low-income housing. They want to put low-income housing right smack in the middle of it. And that's not the American dream, You didn't do that. And low-income housing is great. I built a lot of low-income housing, but you don't put it there. This is one of the richest neighborhoods in the world, and we're going to let those people. And I recommended strongly that everybody gets the immediate approval to build a house, and you give them a 10% bonus so they can build a house 10% larger than they had before, if they want, for all the suffering they've been caused. So they can build a little bit bigger house. So Lee, if you want, will you accept the job? Huh? He's under a lot of stress. Okay, all right? Override those people. Those people are incompetent. Between the mayor and the governor, they're incompetent. They'll never get approved. They'll never get approved. So do whatever you can, Lee. There's a provision that you're allowed to do it, and I'll sign it in 2 seconds, frankly. It'll never happen. I also want to introduce a man, Frank Persigno. Now, if you met Frank, and if you knew Frank, he's quiet, but he's actually a stone-cold killer. He was one of the biggest people in business. He would have been sitting with you. In fact, now he's got a better seat because he's working for the government. He's the head of a lot of things, but the job he's done in this country is great, and he's working on Social Security and a thing called the IRS. He's working with Scott on both of them, really, but the IRS in particular. And he is a fantastic man. Where are you, Frank? Took the biggest pay cut in history. He went from being paid $35 million a year to being paid about $35 a year. I think you may have taken the biggest pay cut in history. He'd be close. He'd be one of the top 5, because a few people have done that. Few billionaires have sort of left. But Frank has gone from one of the most successful people. He worked with Jamie Dimon. I don't think Jamie likes me too much nowadays, but that's okay. I never minded that. But Frank, you are fantastic, and you're doing a great job. We appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you to the family. The director of National Economic Council, a man who's in the news a lot. You know, my only problem is I don't want to lose him. I will tell you that he's working from a big deficit because I don't want to lose him. He's so good. Kevin Hassett. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. A friend of mine, a senator who has been unbelievable. She's a tremendous woman, married to a great football player. Her husband is a massive man. This guy, he played in the NFL, I guess, for 11 years. He was top-of-the-line player. I met him. I said, that's not a normal situation. Look at this guy. This guy was seriously powerful, big, and he's as nice as he is big. And she is one of our best senators, Senator Katie Britt. Thank you, darling. From Alabama. I love Alabama. We love Alabama. Marsha Blackburn is an incredible person. Unfortunately, she's running for governor. She's running for governor of Tennessee. I'd love her not to. I begged her. I said, Marsha, we don't want to lose you in the Senate. But I have to say they're lucky. They're lucky to get you because you are a talent and a great person. And you've been with me all the way, and I appreciate it. And you're a very special person. Marsha, stand up, please. And a senator who's a friend of mine, you wouldn't believe that because we went through a rough campaign together. It was nasty. We got along so well, and we actually did joint rallies. Can you believe it? He wanted to get somebody action, so he's smart. He said, would you do a rally with me? But we did joint rallies, and the press used to say, will you ever, start fighting? I said, don't worry, it'll come. He said the same thing. Don't worry, it'll come. He's a very tough guy, very brilliant guy. In fact, when I said, because I had never gone into a debate before officially, my whole life was a debate, but I'd never debated before officially. And I said, let me find out about my competition. Who are these people? Because many of them, they were senators and mostly senators and governors. And I said, well, why don't we start with this guy named Ted Cruz? Let me, he was the best student at Harvard, #1 in his class. He was the best student at Princeton or something. And he was the national debate champion for 3 years. And I said, well, I don't like that. I didn't know that. I don't like that. And he was a very good debater, I will tell you that. He was a smart guy. But I'll never forget, because he was the first one I looked at. I've just joined the ranks of politics. And the first famous, that was the Rosie O'Donnell. Remember that? Only Rosie O'Donnell? Ireland, you can keep her. Ireland has done us tremendous. The head of Ireland said, are all your people this way? We don't want that. But Ted Cruz has one thing that I like. If I ever have problems, because it's hard to get people approved, he's a brilliant legal mind. He's a brilliant man. If I nominate him for the United States Supreme Court, I will get 100% of the vote. The Democrats will vote for him because they want to get him the hell out. And the Republicans will vote for him because they want to get him the hell out, too. Where's Ted? Where are you, Ted? And with all of that being said, he's a great guy, too. He's a great guy. We've become friends, and he's a very effective person, too. Thank you, Ted, very much. The man knows more about tax than anybody that I know. Jason Smith, congressman, wonderful person. Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Great job. Idaho Governor Brad Little, terrific guy. Thank you, Brad. Georgia Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who hopefully will be the governor of Georgia very shortly. They have a big race. He's leading by a lot in the polls. He was outstanding as a lieutenant governor. He's great everywhere, and I've endorsed him fully, so I don't want to, do anything that you don't know about. I have given him my complete and total endorsement. Burt Jones, where are you, Burt? Thank you, Burt. Great guy. Chief Design Officer of the United States, Joe Gebbia. Joe, thank you. Great idea, great ideas. Also, we have Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary. I like Kevin O'Leary. Where's Kevin O'Leary? Come on, Kevin, it's so nice. He's with me 90% of the time, but when he's with me, he's really with me. Great. And we got the TikTok deal done. Who the hell thought we could do that, right? I know. I wish he wanted to buy TikTok so much, and I would have done it, but his price was slightly lower. Slightly. He's fantastic. What a good, you're an entertainer, businessman, yet the whole quality. So I appreciate. I know what you do. Having done The Apprentice, I see you on television. You have what it takes, right? So I appreciate it. And thanks for all the nice things you do. And Cheryl Hines. Where's Cheryl? Wow. Married to a very, very powerful, important man. And I said, I'll tell you, Bobby, she's strong. I watched her in an interview. I said, Bobby, you keep him in line, don't you, huh? She said, yes, I do. She's got no choice. He's doing a great job, and so are you. Yeah, he's doing a great job. He's doing a very different kind of a job, too, and he's doing things that people have wanted to do for a long time. And they didn't have the courage, so say hello to Bobby, okay? We're also pleased, my daughter, she went crazy when she heard that this was happening. I want to go. You know, she happens to be in the wrong state right now for that, but when she heard that there's a certain person that's here who's the greatest and most successful female rapper in history, Nicki Minaj. Come on. And, you know, and Nicki makes a lot of cash. Not as much as Michael Dell, not quite. Not as much, but that's okay. But Nicki makes a lot of money, and she's generously stepping up. She's investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in Trump accounts to support the children and really the children of her incredible fans. That's great. Focus on that. Why should you give to somebody else's fans? Give to your fans. I like that. But, and I just think she's great. You know, I've been hearing so much over the years, because I didn't know Nicki, and I've been hearing over the years she's a big Trump supporter and a Trump fan, and she took a little heat on occasion. Her community isn't necessarily, I tell you, we did pretty damn well with that, with your community, as we say. But Nicki has been an unbelievable supporter. She gets almost as much as Mr. Wonderful over here. He's been another one that's been so good. But I'd like to ask you to come up, Nicki. Come on up. Come on. She's been such a great supporter, and a great supporter of Trump accounts. And I said, I'm going to let my nails grow, because I love those nails. I'm going to let those nails grow. She's so good. She's been MAGA. What can I say? She's been with us all the way, right, Alex? She's been with us all the way, and just want to thank her. And it wasn't so easy. For you, it was easier, right? You want to come up? You want to come up? Mr. Wonderful, come on up here. You've been terrific. Come on up.
Hello. Well, I don't know what to say, but I will say that I am probably the president's #1 fan. And that's not going to change. And the hate, or what people have to say, it does not affect me at all. It actually motivates me to support him more. And it's going to motivate all of us to support him more. We're not going to let them get away with bullying him and, you know, the smear campaigns. It's not going to work, okay? He has a lot of force behind him, and God is protecting him. Amen.
so nice.
Should I go? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay right here. On behalf of all the entrepreneurs in America, I'd like to thank you, Mr. President, because we create 72% of the jobs. Companies 5 to 500 employees, and all we care about is policy. We love policy, pro-business policy, and these accounts are fantastic for independence and support. I thank you very much. It's all about the entrepreneur, and I think you know that, sir. Well, that was great. A little interlude. I don't know. That's better than getting Scott Bessent up. Thank you both very much. Two terrific people. When Trump accounts officially launch on July 4th of this year, every parent will be able to activate their accounts and access the funds at the trumpaccounts.gov. So it's all set up, all ready to go. It's beautiful. The site is beautiful. On that glorious day, we also expect to have commitments from generous private individuals in all 50 states, and they'll be making additional contributions for children in their own states. And already legendary investor Ray Dalio has pledged to adopt the entire state of Connecticut. That's pretty good, Michael. And thank you very much, Ray. Great legend. And today, one of the original advocates of this program has agreed to adopt his home state of Indiana, Brad Gerstner. And Brad's here someplace. Where's Brad? Come on. I think Michael and Brad, would you come up here, please? Come up here. I mean, this isn't exactly Mr. Wonderful and Nikki, but I think they might be worth more money than Mr. Wonderful, right? These guys are worth a lot of money. But Brad is donating, listen to this, $250 to Trump accounts for all children under 5 in Indiana. So every children, all the children under 5, $250, and he'll be donating tens of millions of dollars more in matching contributions to millions of children all across the country. He's going to make a massive donation already. We know what it is. Brad is not only one of the most successful business people, he's the founder of the Invest America Foundation. And he's been working on this idea for years. And he was the one, he went over to see Michael. Michael loved it. And those two were a hell of a team, along with Mrs. Dell, who's been so great, Susan. I also delighted to report that dozens of major employers have signed up to add the Trump account contributions to their employee benefit packages, including Uber, Schwab, Charter Communications, and many, many others. And just today it was announced that Intel, NVIDIA, Broadcom, IBM, Steak and Shake, Coinbase, Continental Resources, and Comcast have all signed up for really big contributions. So I want to thank them. I want to have you two guys come on up. Would you say a couple of words? Brad and Michael, would you say a couple of words? That's a fantastic. Only Indiana. You can't do bigger. We love Indiana, but you know, how about Indiana, Iowa? No, we appreciate it. Big numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, 4 years ago, we set off on a journey to reconnect every child in America with the American dream. This president ran on a Main Street agenda that too many people had been left out and left behind. And his articulation of no tax on tips, that doesn't help rich folks. That helps those left out and left behind. No tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. And when Ted Cruz authored the Invest America Act in the Senate, and Michael Dell partnered with me to bring the private sector to bear on this, we had the opportunity that this president was willing to sign. He immediately understood the impact. That this wasn't about the wealthy folks in America. This was about the 50 million American families who will be lifted up and reconnected to the American dream, because this is now the law of the land. Forevermore, every child in America, from rural Missouri to rural Indiana, from Trenton to Compton, is going to start off life with an investment account at birth, seated with $1,000, where they privately own NVIDIA and Microsoft, all the greatest companies in this country, right? Not dependent on government, independent from government. Not more socialism. The answer to more socialism is more capitalism. This makes every child in America a capitalist from birth, and it would not have happened without the leadership of our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, without the leadership of the Speaker and Ted Cruz in the Senate, but most importantly, and every business leader in America will tell you this, for too long they had no access in Washington to the White House. People didn't want to hear their ideas. This president is voracious in his desire to hear from America's leaders about how to make America better. This is citizen democracy at its best. An idea that started around a kitchen table in Silicon Valley makes its way to this day. I'm humbled and honored to be here, and I'm grateful for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you heard from Brad, the fact that this bill got passed itself was a miracle, and it creates a platform for communities, for families, for corporations, for philanthropists to add to these accounts. And in not too many years, essentially every child in America will have savings invested in the greatest companies in this country. And that will change the face of this country over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We couldn't be more excited about this and the opportunity to make a difference. The best investment a country can make is in its people, especially in its children. And this creates an incredible platform for that to occur at enormous scale. And we're excited to see it all come together. Thank you all so much.
Those are two fantastic people, I can tell you that. I want to give a very special thanks to some of the CEOs here this morning. Vlad Tenev of Robinhood, what a job he's done. Where's Vlad? What a job you've done. Young guy. Nice young guy, too. Arjun Sethi of Kraken. Arjun, thank you very much, wherever you are. Thank you. Anthony Noto of SoFi Technologies. SoFi. Thank you very much, Anthony. Right. These are the ones you read about, and Bill Ackman is here, Pershing Square, and Hock Tan of Broadcom, and so many others that if I name them, we'll be up here all day. But I just want to say that what a job you've all done. Incredible job, everybody. Just about everybody in this room. Not everybody. I'm not in love with everybody, but a couple of them I don't like very much. But if they're here, I'm starting to like them a lot better because they're here for a very good reason. I'm officially calling on all employers all across America to follow the lead of many of these amazing companies and make matching Trump account contributions to benefit for the American worker, and they're going to benefit the American worker so much. This morning, I'm also pleased to announce that Visa is creating a brand new platform which will allow credit card holders to deposit their cashback rewards directly into Trump accounts. That's a big deal. Visa, thank you. Where's Visa? The head of Visa. Thank you very much, Visa. These initiatives could not come at a better moment because there's never been a better time to invest in the United States of America than right now. Who knew it would have happened this fast? I inherited a mess. We were a country that was laughed at a year and a half ago. We were laughed at. Now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. Nobody even close. So, who knew this was going to take place this quickly? Right, Michael? I didn't think it was going to go that fast. I knew we were going to do it, but I thought it would take a couple of years at least. Just a couple of days longer than the first year, so it's really amazing. And just this morning as I'm running out, I see the S&P 500 hit 7,000 for the first time ever. So I say America is back. America is back. Since the election, the stock market has set 52 all-time record highs, adding $9 trillion in value. And $18 trillion of investment is pouring into the country. It's going to be higher than that. Just over 1 year ago, we were a country that lost its way. We were mocked and scorned, and every American child will now be and have access to something that is really incredible, and they can watch directly the economic boom that's taking place. This is a boom that's taking place, the likes of which we've really never seen. I don't think people, get it yet. Not a lot of people, they don't get it. They don't see the thousands of businesses being built, the hundreds and hundreds of massive factories that are going up all over. But they're going to start to see it. They're starting to see it. I mean, if they're modestly intelligent, if they're very intelligent, they saw it about a year ago. With us today is Craig Smith, a fourth-generation family farmer and volunteer firefighter from Culpeper, Virginia, along with his wonderful wife, Heather. Craig and Heather have an 18-month-old son and a 1-month-old that they also welcomed just recently, twin boys. And they can't wait to activate Trump accounts for all 3 of their children this July 4th. Craig and Heather, do you want to come up here, Craig and Heather? Where are you, Craig and Heather? Come on up, Craig and Heather, come on up. Come on up. It meant so much to them. People write letters. Every once in a while you get a letter, it just hits you. Craig and Heather, come on up. Thank you. That's great. Wow, look at this family, huh? They're a rich family now. The kids are richer than the parents. That's the way we want it. Thank you very much. Wow.
We just want to thank President Trump for all of his hard work and dedication to American families and farm families like ours. Farming is not always easy, and sometimes margins are tight, so investments like this into our children really help us to buy diapers and formula and not have to worry about making financial decisions for them this early on. So thank you very much, President Trump.
Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much. So nice. Also joining us today is the Goins family from Fayetteville, Arkansas. Charlie works in manufacturing, and he's here with his wife, Savannah, his high school sweetheart. In 2022, Charlie and Savannah opened their home to foster care, really expecting to take in 1 child, but soon they were taking in a family of 3 siblings and formally adopting them. A short time later, Charlie and Savannah also welcomed a biological daughter. Trump accounts will give each of these children a much better start in life. And Charlie and Savannah, where are you? Are you down there? Do you want to come up? Come on up here, Charlie, real fast. We're holding up a lot of big business people. We can't hold them up. Michael will take back his donation. Say what? I want my money back. Come on up here. These are great families, but there's millions and millions of families that are going to be so amazed and so happy at what's taken place. Sort of a miracle, I think. Nice to see you. How are you? How are you? Oh, look at that. So nice. Hi. How are you?
Thank you, President Trump, for having my family and me here today. My wife and I have spent the better part of our adult lives working to advance children in our community, and it was our faith that first led us to open our home to foster care, and it was God's plan that allowed us, absolutely. And it was God's plan that allowed us to adopt 3 amazing children out of foster care, to welcome so many more, and of course, this past year, welcome our youngest daughter, Florence, into the world. It's through our experience that we've seen how opportunity, or the lack thereof, can really impact a child at the very beginning stages of their life before they even get a chance themselves. And that's why, my wife and I, along with some of the work that the First Lady is doing, we are working to help foster families, foster and adoptive families, and personally in our state with protections and support in our home state of Arkansas. Every child deserves hope, stability, and a strong chance at a future, a strong future. And for young families, especially like ours, that your first priorities are, of course, your diapers and your wipes and your car seats and all that stuff. And so starting and investing into a investment account is not necessarily on the top of the priority list. And we're so thankful to have this. And I think this sends a powerful message that this administration believes that financial opportunity can start early, that it is intentional, and that it can impact every single family. And my wife and I are so excited that this administration has placed families and children like ours at the forefront of economic policy. And we're so excited for the future of the children and for this country. Thank you.
That's a great job. I was wondering how much longer he could. Did you notice it? It's getting heavier. It's still 50 pounds or something. Right? I said, how much longer is that? And finally, it broke loose. But you could see a loving father there, couldn't you? Huh? The way he did that, right? Wasn't that a loving father? I watched that. He was grabbing. That's a great family. Thank you very much, both. Beautiful. So in conclusion, the ultimate success of the Trump accounts will be measured not just in the wealth created. It will be seen in young people buying houses that they could never have even dreamed of buying. It'll be seen in diplomas earned, companies founded, families formed, and more babies born. It'll really be seen in something where you're given a chance. You're given a chance at life, a very good chance. Above all, the Trump accounts will help bring the hope and prosperity to every community that every community wants to see. And it'll bring back the American dream. The American dream is so beautiful. I would mention it all the time when I'm running. Whenever I run, I talk about the American dream because that's what we want to create. Others don't talk about it. But we have the American dream back, I think now, maybe better than ever before. For generations, Washington politicians have done nothing to take from the hardworking people of our country. They take and take. They do nothing but take. They've made workers' lives harder, sent prices higher, pushed your dreams out of reach. And both parties, they didn't do the job that they were supposed to do. Some were fighting, and sometimes we fight against some of the great politicians we have here. They fight with me, most of them, and we fight to make things better. But we run into walls of other politicians that either don't want to do something or they almost feel like it's a destruction of our country. But now we're doing something much better than giving the next generation a handout. We're giving them ownership of America's future so that they can grow up, chart their own destiny, and make our nation greater and stronger and better than ever before. So I just want to thank all of the people that participated today, the great business leaders, the great celebrities, and all of the people that are in this room. You've done so much. And I just want to also give a little bit of a shout out to a lot of great politicians that are right now voting on some very important measures, plus the politicians in this room. They have really worked hard on this. This is something that it's amazing that it got done. If you knew the political process, it was very complex, very hard to get done, to get all of those votes together. But we did it, and it's going to be great for America. And Brad and Michael, thank you both very much. Special, special people. Thank you very much. And God bless everybody in the room, and God bless America. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
That was President Trump speaking on Trump accounts, in which he hopes to put about $4 trillion into the hands of young Americans' $1,000 seed accounts that he say can reach up to $300,000 by the time they turn 18. And now we're going to move on to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is now addressing the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Venezuela. He's already covered a lot of ground, how internal collapse after Maduro's ouster did not happen despite fears, and quelling concerns over the handling of the country's oil. Let's tune into that hearing.
No doubt. These groups have waged war on the United States. They have waged, for example, Tren de Agua is not just a criminal gang presence in our street. It is a criminal gang directly responsible for narco trafficking.
The Trump administration has acknowledged that the vast majority of the men it rounded up and deported to torture under this law had no criminal records whatsoever.
We didn't torture anybody.
Over 75%.
Who did we torture? We haven't tortured anybody. We've arrested people that are members of gangs and we've deported them. We don't want gang members in our country.
Independent investigations have found that many of the men were here legally. If the administration is willing to lie about who it's targeting under this law, what protections do totally innocent people have against abuse? Again, I want to ask you, will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies
No, of course
Act?
not. I mean, these are people that are threats to the national security of the United States. But I've described this in hearings in the past, including
So
before
you're
you guys.
saying that we're at war?
We are absolutely, when it comes to narco trafficking groups and criminal gangs that are targeting the United States for criminal activity.
We're in a state of war.
There's no doubt about the fact that we're confronting them in a warlike setting because they're waging war on us.
And do the Geneva Convention
They're waging
apply?
war against us and they're enemy combatants as a result of it. And the fact of the matter is that we are confronting these irregular groups, and that's one of the great challenges of the new century in this hemisphere in particular, is that these non-state actors who possess state-like capabilities in terms of their weaponry pose a grave danger to the United States. I don't think any American would dispute that we have cartels that pose a threat to the national security of the United States.
With all of the other laws of when it comes to warfare. I mean, you're saying that he can invoke this wartime power.
No, I'm saying, you're asking me, I'm here to discuss foreign policy and what's in the realm of the Department of State.
Well,
I think your questions are better directed to the Department of Justice.
Enemies Act,
but I would tell you
which is
that
a wartime, which is something that
but you're asking me a question that's
can be invoked during
right,
wartime.
but you're
And it's
asking
only
me a
been
question
invoked during the War of
that's more
1812, World War I, and World War II.
You're
it's
asking
only been
me a
invoked 3
question-
times, and this president is invoking it.
Okay, you're asking me a question about the domestic application of a law that's best directed to the Department of Justice.
It's
No,
not
it
a
is
complication. It's
because
very
you're asking
simple.
me something to opine on something that's in the realm of the Department of Justice in terms of its domestic application. I can tell you that the United States is most certainly confronting terrorist and criminal organizations operating in our hemisphere that pose a grave danger to the United States. Anyone who believes that gangs that flood our country with fentanyl or cocaine are not threats to the United States is not living in reality and certainly does not reflect the opinion of most Americans.
The president already said that he was ready to put American troops in Venezuela again. So we're at war right now. So if things don't go well with the Chavistas you've empowered,
When did the president say he was going to put troops in Venezuela?
A military option, what is your criteria for returning to a military option and putting boots on?
Well, I don't recall the president saying he was going to put troops in Venezuela. Where did he say that?
I'm asking you, what are your...
But that's what you said. I didn't remember the president
has already said that he was ready to put American troops in Venezuela.
No, I think the president has said that he retains the right as commander-in-chief to protect the United States against any imminent threats. Maybe that involves troops, maybe that involves air power. We hope, but we don't anticipate that being the case in Venezuela.
I worry that you are playing fast and loose with our nation's
Well, I just gave you testimony here.
I just want to conclude by saying...
Yeah, but I just gave you testimony of how well things are moving forward, not as fast as everybody would like.
But you also said that in 6 or 9 months, if things don't go well, you're going to have to do something else. And the president's already said that he's not ruled out the military option. And you've also just said that, yes, we are at war. The president has wartime powers.
Every president retains the power to use military to protect.
So it's reasonable for me to ask you...
And I gave you a very specific example. Every president retains the right to defend the United States against an imminent threat. Yes, if there are just give you an example, Iranian drones deployed in Venezuela that could threaten the United States, we most certainly will address that, even if it's located in Venezuela. But we hope we don't get to that point. We don't expect to get to that point. I don't think that... We're not trending in that direction. That's a fact. But that said, on the one hand,
people of America are worried that this is a president who engages in yet another forever war, Mr. Secretary. We don't need to be in another forever war. And that is the path that we are going towards. And let me just say...
Well, how are we going towards a forever war if we're dealing with Delcy Rodriguez every day?
You're not going to ask him to rescind his invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. That puts Americans in jeopardy. And let me just say something about the president's recent comments about NATO allies. When I served in Iraq, there were Polish forces there with us. There were British forces there with us. There were Spanish forces there with us. I personally landed in Elzi, España, which came under direct attack by insurgents. Polish troops who have worked with the Illinois military, with the Illinois National Guard for 30 years, died in Afghanistan, Mr. Secretary.
All the president wants is for NATO to have more
our NATO
capabilities.
allies have stood beside us.
He wants our allies to have more
and we need to maintain the strength of that alliance.
I get it.
yield.
All the president wants is
Your
our
time's
allies.
up. Not making much progress here.
Well, let me just say, the president just wants our allies to have more capabilities to be involved in operations like that, God forbid, in the future if necessary.
That's not what
an
he said.
unreasonable
He said
request.
that they stayed a little behind, and they certainly did not come to our defense. And
Well, not
which
every
they
country
did.
in Europe, not every country in NATO participated in those missions. Some did.
Denmark suffered some of the greatest military casualties.
There's no doubt that many of our allies have stepped forward and provided assistance to us, and there are many others that simply don't have the capability to do it now or in the future.
That's not what the president said.
So that's what he was pointing to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. I also want to thank you for reaching out to me the night of the execution of the arrest warrant against Nicolas Maduro. I could tell when we talked that you had been up all night, and it was kind of you to reach out to me and describe what had happened that evening. I've long been a believer in the fact that the United States has been abundantly blessed by geography. God and nature's God have blessed the American continent with two vast oceans, one to our east, one to our west, that have protected us from the old powers of other parts of the world. We should use those to our advantage. At times in our past, we have somewhat neglected the Western Hemisphere in recent decades, and I'm pleased that you and President Trump have been refocusing on the Western Hemisphere. As we look at burden sharing in other parts of the world and pivot some of this focus back to our own hemisphere, tell me what that looks like. Tell me what it looks like to orient some of our burden sharing toward our own hemisphere.
Well, I think you're seeing some of it now. Look, our hope is eventually not to have a military presence of the kind you've seen in the Caribbean to deal with this very acute matter. But the truth of the matter is that it was surprising in the first place, right? If these ships and these assets were deployed in the Indo-Pacific or in the Mediterranean or in the Middle East somewhere, no one would blink an eye. They say, well, that's normal. That's what we always do. The fact that they were deployed in the Western Hemisphere was a shock to everybody because we haven't done it. In fact, according to Southcom, they've rarely have ever had assets permanently deployed to them. They may have been transiting through at some point, but not permanently deployed to deal with a very acute matter. And that is, and these are, these things become interrelated here at some point, but they are separate in many ways. And it's part of what I was trying to explain to Senator Duckworth. We have a real reality in our region of these transnational criminal terrorist organizations that in many cases possess weapons that you ascribe to a nation state, not to a gang, who pose a grave threat to the national security of the United States, but also to the stability of the region. If you walk through the region, what is the primary threat in Colombia? Transnational criminal organizations. What is the threat to Mexico? What is the threat to the Caribbean basin? These groups have to be confronted. They have to be confronted forcefully. What's the threat in Haiti? To systemic collapse. And that is these criminal gangs that basically control territory and threaten the ability to even form a government there in that regard. So it's endemic throughout the region, and it ultimately impacts the United States through mass migration, through drug trafficking, and other related criminal organizations. And so we need to have a force posture that can confront that and that can provide assistance in conjunction with other partners. We also need more countries that are willing to cooperate with us and collaboratively work on these things, the way Ecuador is now doing, the way El Salvador has done, the way Trinidad and Jamaica and other countries, the way we historically have done with Colombia, by the way, and continue to do in many respects. So we hope Venezuela will be one of those. Imagine if a future, or even the current interim authorities, or a future legitimate government of Venezuela cooperated with the United States against Tren de Aragua, cooperated with the United States against the ELN, the FARC, and the drug trafficking organizations. How much easier it would be to confront these challenges that we face. But it will require some force posture in the region. I think the one area, if your question is in the context of NATO, the one area we have to recognize is that we need to have a presence in the Indo-Pacific. Many of you travel overseas and are constantly being told by our Indo-Pacific allies they want to see a sustained commitment of the United States to the region. We still have obligations and needs that we need to address when it comes to the Middle East. We have a growing threat of the rise of terrorism potentially in the African continent. And then, of course, you point to the Western Hemisphere. So that doesn't mean we're abandoning NATO or abandoning Europe. It does mean that we are going to have to, at some point, readjust our force posture in the world to deal with all of these realities. And as a result is why I keep making the point, the stronger our allies and more capable our allies in NATO are, the more flexibility we'll have to do that. We'll still be there with our assurances. We'll still be there with our presence. We'll still have some of the largest military deployments in the world will be in Europe with our allies. But we are going to need some flexibility to do this over time. And we've told this to our allies, and we've told them there'll be no surprises. And most of them understand it. Frankly, they do. And that's why they're moving very quickly in many cases to rearm and reinvigorate themselves.
Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen China gain pretty significant footholds by historical standards in South America, in Central America, in parts of the Caribbean. Sometimes this occurs simultaneously with and in the same places as drug cartels, places where drug cartels are the strongest. How would you describe the connection between those two things? Are they correlated, or is there a causal?
Well, the correlation maybe to the extent that you have, usually when you have strong narco organizations or drug trafficking organizations, you also have very weak states that are, in some cases, vulnerable to corruption. So the general Chinese practice has been, you go into a country, you offer to build a bunch of stuff that you end up building poorly. And to get that contract, you do it as a market share thing, not because you can make money off it, but because it puts you in place at the expense of everybody else. You sometimes have to bribe people locally in order to get that, and it gives you a foothold into that country and allows you to expand into other sectors. In some cases, frankly, it has been like in telecommunications, because Huawei shows up with a deal and no Western company shows up with a deal that's affordable, and so they go with Huawei because they want to have 4G, not to mention 5G. Huawei provides a product that's not the best, but it's good enough and they can afford it. And it's subsidized by the Chinese government. So we've seen that play out in place after place. It became quite acute, for example, in the Panama Canal Zone, where a Chinese company ended up owning both ports on the Pacific and on the Caribbean side and Atlantic side of that canal, which is of grave concern to the United States. So I do think you've seen their presence, largely through economic means over time, create leverage over nations in the country who become emboldened and either trapped in debt traps or trapped in bad contracts they can't get themselves out of, and always in sectors that are valuable to China that include rare earths, and critical minerals, energy, and infrastructure.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member. Secretary, good to see you again. I want to ask about the oil. Under U.S. law, funds received by the government must be deposited with the Treasury. Earlier, you testified that the funds are being held short-term in Qatar and then will move to a Treasury-blocked account. What is the statutory authority for the administration relying on Qatar to hold the funds?
It's not our funds. The funds are in an account that's owned and signed. It's an account that belongs to Venezuela, but it has U.S. sanctions as a blocking mechanism on it. And one of the primary reasons why it was in a third country initially, until we could create the mechanism to move it to a U.S. presence, is twofold. One, we have an issue we're working through on recognition. What is exactly, you have to recognize a government, but we don't recognize this government. We recognize the 2015 National Assembly. So we have to find some creative way legally to meet that standard. The other is, frankly, creditors. If any of that money touched a U.S. bank, even if it was an account in the name of the Venezuelans, it would immediately be seized upon by a number of creditors who eventually we'll have to take care of. But in the short term, that would impede the ability of the Venezuelan authorities to receive the funds they need to operate.
So do you have the, I mean, this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Either it's American money, in which case it's subject to the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, and there are all kinds of things that attend to that. You're saying it's Venezuela's money, but it does sound like, according to the EO, according to the president's statements, you are in charge of that money. What authority are you relying on to be in charge, almost in a sort of receivership kind of arrangement, of how funds are both received and expended for a foreign country? Like, wouldn't you have to come to Congress to establish that kind of relationship?
Well, no, because the money never enters our hands. We only control the disbursement of the money. We don't control the actual money in the sense of like it comes into our bank account.
Do you think that you have somewhere in the statute or the Constitution the authority to control disbursements of a foreign country?
Well, they've agreed to this. And that's the key. They've agreed to this arrangement in which the sanctions that are placed on this oil is what blocks its distribution. So we've agreed to release sanctions and allow the disbursement of the funding as long as they're spending it in a certain way. So I understand it's novel, but it's the best we could come up with in the short term to ensure that they're...
Is there a written agreement that memorializes this?
Yes, I believe there is, and there will have to be one most certainly once we transition that to U.S. accounts.
Secretary, my understanding is the committee doesn't have this agreement.
Well, I can...
If we do or we don't?
Yeah.
We do
And you
not
probably
have that.
wouldn't because it's a Treasury matter. Treasury's handled it, but I can most certainly talk to Treasury about providing you the information.
Also, you're the National Security Advisor, so you do have a role here in coordinating between the departments. So it's not just like you can punt this to Treasury.
Yeah, I just didn't bring the document with
No,
me.
I got it.
Okay.
I just want you to land it and get it to the committee because look, you're being transparent. I think this is novel. I think it's funky. I think it may not even be permissible, but I don't know until I see the document. And I'd like you to just land it for us, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, like I said, and by the way, by the time I get it to you, hopefully we won't even have that account anymore. It'll be in a bit more traditional, where we can use our sanctions as leverage on how the money's being spent.
I'm just going to move on to a couple of other issues. Your comments that Havana should be concerned about the Maduro operation is fueling speculation that this administration will turn its sights to Cuba next. Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to, that doesn't mean that we're going to make it change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
But you know what we mean by regime change. We don't mean, I wish someone else were in charge. When we talk about regime change, we're talking about using the power of the United States, usually kinetic power, but often other kinds of coercion. And I'm not even saying that that's always not in our interest. I'm just saying, I'm not asking you whether we would prefer a different kind of government. I'm asking whether you are trying to precipitate the fall of the current regime.
Yeah, but that's statutory. The Helms-Burton Act, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is codified. It was codified in law, and it requires regime change in order for us to lift the embargo.
Okay. We have not received any information on the Board of Peace. Do you commit to informing us about what the heck this is?
Yeah, it's a Board of Peace.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'll just note that Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Belarus, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Egypt, Hungary, Indonesia, Israel, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Morocco, Mongolia, Pakistan, Paraguay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. There are a lot of countries with whom we normally work very closely and with whom we are aligned geopolitically and in terms of values that are not on the Board of Peace. And so I think it's reasonable for us to wonder whether something in terms of a, I don't know, competitive structure to sort of either undermine the UN or circumvent the UN. I just worry that a lot of our friends are not on that list, and some of our adversaries are.
So to 2 points, the impediment that they have is, first of all, it was chartered by the UN. I mean, the UN, it's a UN resolution that actually created the mechanism by which the board was set up. And the primary and sole focus of that board right now is to administer phase 2 and phase 3 of the plan in Gaza.
Okay.
And we welcome, all these countries have been invited. Some in Europe have chosen not to join it, either because they have constitutional, they require constitutional approval of their parliament in order to join, depending on some leaders. Like, for example, I'm thinking there are a couple countries in Europe that could not join until they got permission from their vote. In other cases, because they are concerned about what you just pointed out, they argue and they want to know, is this a replacement for the UN? This is not a replacement for the UN, but the UN has served very little purpose in the case of Gaza, other than the food assistance.
Can I just
and
move
so we
on
think it's critical to have something that's in charge of that.
One final 10-second question. We are hopefully about to enact appropriations law either this Friday or soon after that. And I just want your commitment to work with my team and anyone else who has jurisdiction on the implementation of the SFOPS bill.
Yes, of course. And we're very happy you're about to pass it. Even if you pass none of the other budgets, you should pass that one.
Thank you. I agree.
You could have gone a little further than that, Secretary. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your service. You and I overlapped in the Senate by only a couple of days, and as a result, I've only had the luxury.
Those are my 2 best days in the Senate.
As a result, I've only had the luxury of watching you from a distance, but I will tell you unequivocally, I'm grateful for your role. I believe unequivocally that you and President Trump have made the world a safer place. I push back on the false narrative that we're not respected. I think we're respected far more than we were around the world. And so I'm grateful for that. I don't know how you get around the world the way that you do. You must have some type of superpower, and I'm grateful for the time you spent with us this morning. Now, all of that said, I do have a basic concern that I'd like to raise with you. I now chair the Western Hemisphere, which you previously chaired, the subcommittee. And I'm often struggling to get briefings, clear information, or meaningful cooperation from the administration and the State Department. Let me give you 3 specific examples. I suspect most of these are out of your visibility, so I want to bring them to your attention. Senator Kaine and I, who's the ranking member, tried to do a hearing on Venezuela late last year. We were told the State Department would not participate in that hearing. I'm trying to put together a hearing right now on the prioritization of the Western Hemisphere, which I think would be very helpful to the administration, and we're struggling to get the State Department to participate in that. I couldn't get a briefing on the drug boat operations until the Kaine war power resolution, and then all of a sudden we got a briefing, but I didn't get that because I was the chair of the Western Hemisphere. And I want to be clear, I support what's happening with Maduro and what's going on there, but I do think the administration could get Congress to be a better partner by informing us better. And from my perspective, I'm struggling to see that. And I would ask you, if you were the chair of the Western Hemisphere, would you be okay with that from the State reaction like that from the State Department? And what would you suggest I do?
Yeah, no, look, I think one of the challenges we face, particularly on Venezuela, on the prioritization on the Western Hemisphere, you'll get that briefing. I don't know why they said you haven't been able to get it, but we can figure that out pretty quickly. And but I would say both on Venezuela and the drug boat operation, here's the challenge that we face. This is a committee, as you said, I was there for many years, that has oversight over the State Department. The drug boat operation, which I support, but is not a State Department operation. I think now that I'm here testifying with you, there's a lot of State Department involvement in the issue of transitioning and all the projects that we're doing in Venezuela. But everything that led up to that point was not primarily within the jurisdiction of the Department of State. These were Department of War and Department of Justice operations that were ongoing. And so for us, the struggle in those cases would be to provide you witnesses that could say anything meaningful on a topic that was largely from an interagency perspective in the realm of other agencies. Now, if you were in some of the other committees, I don't know if they've got those hearings, those that perhaps can tell you that are on armed services and the like. So I think that was the struggle both in December with a hearing on Venezuela policy, and again now and with the drug boat one. On the issue of the broader context of our priorities in the Western Hemisphere, I think that's something we most certainly can and will provide because it features prominently in our national security strategy. And I think we have a lot of good stories to tell about the Western Hemisphere.
I'll just be clear, we haven't even been able to get that from the State Department.
To get what?
Help on a hearing for...
No, you'll get it. You'll get it.
Okay. Would love to have your commitment moving forward that we could have that type of cooperation that the Western Hemisphere...
Yeah, I just got to make sure that the people were... Look, I don't want you to have a meaningless hearing. If you're asking about something that's not in our... It's like having a hearing on agriculture in front of the State Department. We have limited involvement because from an interagency perspective, in the case of the drug boats and Venezuela, at the time you requested, this was primarily a Department of War function. And so, but in the case of the priorities on the Western Hemisphere, that will happen.
Okay.
We look forward to doing that.
Let's move on. You mentioned Russia, China, Iran a little bit earlier. I'm very concerned, as you are, about their influence in the Western Hemisphere. If we put Venezuela aside for just a moment, can you talk about where we're seeing the influence, particularly of China, in the Western Hemisphere, and what progress we've made or what we need to be thinking about?
Well, China specific?
All of them are important,
yeah.
but specifically on China.
I mean, look, when Iran and Russia... In Iran, their primary foothold in the region was Venezuela. Let me just put that up front. And it involved more than just selling weapons and all this other stuff. I mean, in many cases, there's clear evidence now that they were providing passports, Venezuelan passports with false identities to people who operated on behalf of both Iran and Hezbollah. And so deep concerns about that, and that needs to stop and end. In the case of Russia, their primary presence of influence in the region is Venezuela and to some extent Nicaragua and Cuba, which is where they operate. In the case of China, they do have a presence in Cuba. They have this debt relationship with Venezuela where they were basically taking Venezuelan oil as payment on debt, and then they were reselling it at a huge profit because they were buying it on discount. That is now obviously ended. And if their debt is legitimate, a future Venezuelan government will have to address it and deal with it as part of a broader restructuring of their debt. But in the short term, that is now ended. But the primary way that China plays in the Western Hemisphere is through commercial relations. They engage themselves in a country. They're very interested in telecommunication. They're very interested in building and controlling key infrastructure. They're very interested in critical mineral rights. And they've secured many leases for many years because of neglect on our part in allowing them to do that. And it's given them leverage and a presence in many of these countries. I will say that I think that influence in our hemisphere has eroded over the last year. For example, Panama left the Belt and Road Initiative. We have new leaders in Chile, in Peru, in Paraguay, in Chile and in Honduras that have expressed a strong desire to realign with the United States and our priorities. And we have great relationships with Argentina, Paraguay, and other countries in the region who are also very cooperative. And we've had great cooperation from the Panamanian authorities as well, including a case before the Supreme Court. I don't know if the final has been submitted that could lead to the eviction and removal of a Chinese-controlled company that controlled both ports at the Panama Canal.
Thank you. I wish we had more time. I'm out of time. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I want to discuss corruption in the White House and its intersection with our foreign policy. The President and his family have used the office of the presidency to pocket $1.4 billion plus since he was sworn in. A New York Times analysis entitled "Trump's Plundering of America" indicates that some of that is a result of the president selling corruption here at home, but much of it relates to the president selling out U.S. interests overseas to make a killing for his family, including giving away sensitive U.S. semiconductor and AI technologies to the UAE, while the UAE pumped $2 billion into one of the Trump family ventures. And then there are all the other Trump deals that are intertwined with tariff or foreign policy matters. Golf courses in Saudi Arabia and Vietnam, Trump hotels and office buildings in other countries. And of course, there's the $400 million jet from Qatar. The list goes on and on. By any measure, this is the most corrupt administration in American history. We also see the president wielding U.S. power overseas in a way that advances the interests of his billionaire buddies at the expense of American interests. It was Ron Lauder, who has business ventures in Greenland, who reportedly first put the idea of grabbing Greenland into President Trump's mind. And in the case of Venezuela, President Trump has said he talked to oil executives about toppling Maduro and going into Venezuela before anyone in Congress knew. We know that in President Trump's mind, deposing Maduro was not about stopping the flow of fentanyl or drugs in the United States. He cut the budget for DEA. He pardoned the former Honduran president convicted of drug running. And the new president, Delcy Rodriguez, has herself been long suspected by DEA of being involved in drug smuggling. She's also a longtime hardened communist leader, so this operation certainly was not about bringing more freedom and democracy to Venezuela. In fact, the president told us what it was all about at his big press conference after seizing Maduro. The president said it was about oil, oil, oil. He used the word oil 19 times, never mentioned democracy, or freedom, or human rights. And so the pattern of corruption is clear. Now, President Trump has said publicly that he had communications with folks from the oil industry about going into Venezuela before anyone here in Congress was notified. Mr. Secretary, simple yes or no question. Were you with President Trump during any of those conversations he had with people with oil interests in Venezuela about the possibility of deposing Maduro?
That's not a simple yes or no question, but I can answer it quickly, and that is the president always elicits opinions from all sorts of people, including, for example, Chevron has an active license in Venezuela. They operate in Venezuela. They've been doing so even when the sanctions were in place. So of course you would ask Chevron, what is your opinion of Delcy Rodriguez? What are your opinion of their economy and of their prospect? But the notion that somehow the president authorized this challenge at the urging of oil executives is absurd. That never happened.
Mr. Secretary, I'm asking whether you were with the president.
That never happened. I couldn't be with him because it never happened. The oil executives were not involved whatsoever in any of the planning on this matter. None.
Did the president, as he said publicly, inform them about the U.S. operations?
I think all of those executives learned about this operation the same time everybody else did.
Well, President Trump has said the opposite in public.
No.
Yes, he has. I mean, he said it. I think it was aboard Air Force One on an airplane. It's on public record. You can take a look. Look, Paul Singer, who you know, gave $8 million toward Trump's 2024 campaign. Conveniently, through his hedge fund, he's acquired Citgo out of bankruptcy, which is suddenly very, very valuable. Did you or President Trump have any communications with Paul Singer about Venezuelan oil in the months leading up to the military action in Venezuela?
I can tell you I did not, and I would be very surprised what the president did in that regard. And in fact, that Singer position that you've outlined, which is not just him but other creditors, was actually was blocked. We don't want to see. It's one of the reasons why we had to do this account in a third country in the interim, is because we don't want it to be something that's picked apart by creditors.
I appreciate that, and we'll monitor it carefully. There's also Vitol. They've been given a license for Venezuelan oil worth about $250 million. Vitol's senior partner, John Addison, gave $6 million to the Trump-aligned PACs in the last cycle. And the list goes on, Mr. Secretary. And I have to say that when you have the President of the United States himself, after taking Maduro, get up and say this was about oil, 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 it does make all of us ask the question whether he put men and women in the U.S. military at risk simply so he could grab that oil.
Well, that oil,
yeah,
and I don't know if you were here. I think you were here the whole hearing. I don't think you had left. Number one, the only reason why we use Traffi and Vitol is simply because in the short term, we had to move 50 million barrels of oil that were stuck. And Venezuela needed to turn that into cash so that they wouldn't have systemic collapse. And the fastest way to do it in the short term is for the traders to do it, because that's in the business that they're in. That is not the permanent structure. The permanent structure we want to see is a normal oil industry where it's sold directly. You know, companies have licenses down there, they have an arrangement to pay royalties, and they move the oil directly to their refineries or sell it in the global market, not through middlemen. Yeah. The only reason why they were used in this instance is because we had an acute short-term problem, which is how do we provide funding from their own revenue, not ours, to keep their government afloat. So in essence, we allowed Venezuela to use their own oil to generate revenue to pay teachers and firefighters and police officers and keep the function of government operating so we didn't have systemic collapse. But that system with those traders, that is not the long-term plan here at all.
My only point, Mr. Secretary, is those folks who gave a lot of money to the Trump campaign have done very well as a result of what's happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Daines.
Secretary Rubio, good to have you up here. I just returned from India, had a chance to visit with leadership there, as well as spend time with our new ambassador, Sergio Gore. He's off to a great start, and very profitable visit. Hope to debrief on it soon, if I might. By the way, I think if we were to pick an MVP of the West Wing, Secretary Rubio, my vote's for Marco Rubio. So
we have a lot of MVPs, don't we?
I know you do. I know you do. But we get a vote on one. I think you've done a great job of this first year. Very proud to claim my former colleague and now our Secretary of State. Secretary Rubio, as you've noted, there are numerous reasons and good reasons why the U.S. is the arbiter of Venezuelan petroleum sales. With the new export sales framework, the Venezuelan government is now looking to other options to reimburse some of our adversaries, Iran, Russia, as well as Iran's proxies, to include petroleum byproducts, which contain valuable minerals and so forth, Flexicoke. Has the administration considered expanding the export controls to additional petroleum byproducts?
Well, I'm sure we would, except that I can tell you a couple things that are happening. They have, in essence, represented to us, and we have seen in action in the work that they're doing directly with Secretary Wright, who's handling this portfolio on a daily basis. He has a deep historic and career knowledge of this field, is that on all of these things regarding natural resources, their preference and their partner of choice moving forward will be the United States and Western companies, that's what they intend to do. As a point of example, and I said this earlier in the hearing, you may not have been here, today they used to get 100% of their diluent, to have very heavy crude, and so it has to be mixed with light crude in order to make it, refinable and movable. And they were getting 100% of it from Russia, primarily because of sanctions. They prefer to have ours. Why? Number one, it's closer. Number two, it's higher quality. Today, 100% of that diluent is coming from the United States. They were involved in a very complex gold market in which they were mining for gold and silver, and it was being exported almost entirely through Turkey. And we believe the Iranians were using that as a laundering operation for themselves ultimately as well, potentially. And certainly know that they had an interest in the oil industry as well. We are on the verge of a process in which that will be sold through U.S. markets in a legitimate way that won't go to finance and support. I think we'd like to apply that model to various things. But the end goal in all of this is, number one, not to spend any American money, and number two, for Venezuela to have a normal, legitimate economy that's not benefiting cronies, that's not benefiting corruption, and is not benefiting our geopolitical adversaries. So far, the interim authorities have expressed a desire to cooperate with us on all of these fronts. You identify an area you want to work with, they say yes. And we're making progress on all of it. We've faced no impediments to date in regards to expanding that relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Secretary Rubio, thank you. And maybe we'll talk with Secretary Wright. We think there may be some workarounds in terms of what's happening there with some of these petroleum byproducts. We call it Flexicoke, it has vanadium in it. And something we could talk with Secretary Wright, which absolutely would be something they're trading right now to our adversaries like Iran, Iranian proxies, as well as the Russians. But thank you, and we're off to a great start, as you say. We're playing a long game here, and you're playing it very, very well. I want to pivot now to EU energy. I chair the subcommittee here in this committee for Europe. Next, we're going to have a hearing. We're looking about having a conversation on EU regulations that are hindering energy security, that's benefiting now, of course, the Russians and hindering the development of alternative supply chains. Mr. Secretary, here's my question. As Russia continues its war in Ukraine, how important is it for Europe to develop a pro-energy posture to ensure they have energy security?
Well, I would argue that one of the reasons why we have a war in Ukraine is because Russia thought they could get away with it because of how dependent Europe was on them for energy. And they felt there's no way the Europeans are going to come hard at us because they're too dependent on us for energy. So I think most certainly it served as a contributing factor to the war happening, among others, obviously. The second point is the point the President's repeatedly made. We love Europe. We want Europe to be strong. We share a lot of common bonds, both through history and culture, and also through our alliances. And part of our concerns is that Europe is becoming increasingly vulnerable when it comes to their energy supplies. Increasingly vulnerable both for domestic economic growth, which will allow them to sustain investments in defense and be more reliable partners, but also vulnerable to Russian oil and other things of this nature. So we are concerned, though it's not our decision to make, we are concerned that EU policies in general are leaving Europe more vulnerable at a time when they should be getting stronger in their ability to resist pressure from both Russia and China.
Secretary, thank you. And we hope to have that discussion next week at the subcommittee level. Last question is back to one of my favorite topics, back to Central Asia. We had a great dinner at the White House with the 5 Central Asian presidents that you were at, President Trump, as well as Vice President Vance. I had an honor to be there with you all. They're making a major shift right now in terms of having a closer diplomatic and economic relations with the United States. That all fits in part of the geopolitical puzzle, which relates to energy supply as well. Here's my question. How important is it that we end these Jackson-Vanik trade restrictions as it relates to our relationship with Central Asia? And for background here, Senator Murphy and I are co-sponsors of that bill. We hope to actually get this done and on the president's desk. It's an ancient Soviet-era restriction that is not relevant at all, but frankly is hindering our relationship with these important Central Asian.
Yeah, no, we agree. We agree, and that, like I said, one of these areas that you've been focused on for a long time. Ambassador Gore, that as you know is in India, is also an envoy to these 3 countries, just came back from Tajikistan a couple days ago. So I think that absolutely we would like to see that because it would allow us to do even more.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, and thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. I'm going to get right into it because I want to build on Senator Van Hollen's line of questioning. President Trump pardoned the former Honduran president after he was convicted of trafficking roughly 400 tons of cocaine into the United States, cocaine that contributed to the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans year after year. Yet the president and his cabinet authorized a military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro in order to arrest him for virtually the same crime. So yes or no, because I have a bunch of questions here. To the best of your knowledge, was Hernandez convicted of trafficking approximately 400 tons of cocaine into the United States?
I'm not involved in the pardon process. I can tell you.
No, I'm just asking if he...
Yeah, but I don't do yes or no. I don't play games. This is not a game show.
Do you know he was... Okay, so I'm just going to tell you he was...
So I can answer your question because I know what you're getting at, but go ahead.
He was convicted. I know.
The president felt that he was unfairly treated. I can't give you much insight because I'm not involved in the pardon process.
Would you not concede? Can you not understand how the American people and how the world are clearly going to be frustrated by the hypocrisy of this when one man is convicted and pardoned and another man captured, and how it undermines the United States' credibility on the world stage?
No, but the difference is that, again, I can't opine on the specifics of his case because I wasn't involved in the pardon, but he was not a sitting office holder. He was not even the president of Honduras when that decision was made, either to convict him. The difference between him and Nicolas Maduro is he was actively engaged in narco trafficking. It was an ongoing endeavor.
I think it does undermine our credibility, but I'm going to move on to some foreign policy decision-making here, because despite the fact that you famously or infamously have numerous jobs in the administration, your Secretary of State, your National Security Advisor, it is increasingly unclear who's actually directing U.S. foreign policy under President Trump. We have a Special Envoy Witkoff. He's reportedly conducted Russian-Ukraine talks in Switzerland beyond your awareness. He and Jared Kushner have been described as managing the president's Gaza plan. Meanwhile, Ambassador Barrack is leading on Syria policy, while Special Envoy Boulos is appearing to lead on our Africa policy. So I have to ask you, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, are you the lead for U.S. government on foreign policy?
No. The lead on U.S. foreign policy is named Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. On the individuals you've described, these are very valuable teams. We have if I can answer, because I think it's important. It's a legitimate question. I have the distinction, but I think both the benefit of being the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. As National Security Advisor, my job is to coordinate the interagency function of national security, and that involves foreign policy. So I speak to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the case of Gaza and now Russia, probably 10 times a day. We have multiple meetings and coordination. All of it is we build a team, we gather facts, we present options, and then we take them to the president. It is the president who directs the the foreign policy of the United States. That's always been the case, by the way.
You can't overrule their decisions. Do you outrank the special envoys and ambassadors? Do they get your input as
as an example?
Do they care about your input, or do they go straight to the president?
There's no time in which the president is presented an option by one of us at the exemption of everybody else. It depends on the portfolio. But in every one of these portfolios, we have a team approach to this, which is the way the system is supposed to work. It's not the way it's always worked. You have had in the past tensions between the National Security Council that became operational and the Department of State. In this particular case, there's not much conflict between the two because it's the same person. And we basically, what we basically try to do in every one of these unique missions is we create a consensus team around it, and then we present the president options together. It's the president's decision, nobody else's. There's no overruling here. The president makes the decision. Our job is to present him options.
Shouldn't they report to you? Shouldn't there be a line of command and a line of transparency?
They report to me every day.
Where does the buck stop?
But they report to me every day in terms of keeping me apprised of what's happening. I give advice. I give, in some cases, direction. They involved heavily. For example, the special envoys rely almost exclusively on State Department personnel to assist them in all of their efforts. For example, on the Board of Peace, we helped them position the entire gathering last week and all of the work that's going to happen now. On every one of these issues, it's not linear. No single individual other than the president has the ability to dictate our foreign policy. Our job is to come to a consensus view on the best way forward. Where there are disputes, those are presented to the president, and he makes the decision.
Let's talk about the Board of Peace then, because all treaties and statutes have to be approved by Congress, and the president is starting a new Board of Peace, and we would need that authority. The authority for the filing stems from the International Organizations Immunities Act, but it's my understanding it only provides the president with such authority when participation by the in an organization has been approved by treaty or statute. Treaties and statutes must be approved by Congress, so when will the administration be requesting Congress pass legislation to authorize the president to extend this benefits to the Board of Peace, creating the Board of Peace, and when will it be sent?
Well, actually, the Board of Peace was chartered and set up by the UN Security Council through a vote of the UN Security Council as to deliberation. So it's an international organism recognized by the Security Council of the United Nations, which is something I think many of you should be supportive of. The fact that we're doing it.
The president is claiming his authority is from the International Organizations Immunities Act. And this law only provides the president authority when U.S. participation has been approved by treaty or statute. I know my time is up. Please consider working with us to do these things. You know what it is to be a senator. You know what that collaboration and cooperation mean. And I think that all of us expect that respect from you and would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Secretary, you've been very generous with your time. We have just a few comments to wind up here. Senator Shaheen.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. I hope that you will come more often before this committee. But I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One is that under the CASE Act, the State Department is required, as are other agencies, to give documents like the one that Senator Schatz was raising for the agreement between Venezuela and the U.S. to this committee. We have not yet received it, so I hope that we will see it in the near future. The other thing, with respect to the exchange between you and Senator Rosen, I can tell you that we have, as the minority staff, requested on multiple occasions updates from the State Department on the special envoy's negotiations on the Ukraine war with Russia, and we have been denied access to any of that information. I would hope that, number one, that would be available, because I think everybody's interested in trying to support efforts to end this war in Ukraine. This should not be an adversarial position. And number two, I would also hope that, like Senator Curtis, that you would be willing to have someone from state come before the committee. We have not had a hearing on negotiations over the war in Ukraine since I've been on this committee and since the president took office. And so I hope you will make that commitment to come, have state come and be part of a hearing on the war in Ukraine and the negotiations there.
Yeah, and we would love to do that, and I'll make sure that happens. And I will tell you, I can give you a brief update. I know it's late, but I don't mind. I mean, we can continue to talk about this a little bit because it's important. It's a very fluid situation, unfortunately. I mean, as you know, it's moving very quickly. My sense of it is that for the most part, I discussed the security guarantees piece, which was part of a meeting and efforts that took place in the early part of this year. I think the one remaining item remains the one you're all familiar with, and that is a territorial claim on Donetsk in particular. And I know there's active work going to try to see if both sides' views on that can't be reconciled. It's still a bridge we haven't crossed. It's still a gap, but at least we've been able to narrow down the issue set to one central one. And it will probably be a very difficult one, but nonetheless, it's one that work is going on. There was a meeting late last week in the UAE, which I think for the first time in many years, was trilateral, involved the U.S. presence. Jared was there and Steve Witkoff were there, along with representatives of Russia and Ukraine. They were going to follow up talks again this week in that regard, bilateral. There might be a U.S. presence, but it won't be Steve and Jared. And we continue to try to move that forward. I want to speak in frankness with you. Some of this stuff that's being talked about, it's easier for the parties engaged to find flexibility on some of these matters if they're not being deliberated in the public on a constant basis, because it creates political pressures internally on both sides. As you can imagine in Ukraine, you know, the notion that you would even consider a change in land and after all that's gone in the war it's difficult. And in the case of Russia, they've been telling their people for 2.5 years that they're winning this war overwhelmingly. So people are going to wonder, why are we giving up land if we're winning so strongly? So there's some dynamics there at play that are important. But I think if you need more information on that, we'll provide it. Just know that this has been so fluid that an update like the one I just gave you could be outdated in 72 hours if some new development occurs. But your point is taken, and we'll be responsive to that.
I appreciate that. I think the other point of a hearing is it gives people a chance to ask questions that we're hearing, as you know, from our constituents, from other people, and try and get answers. And I appreciate that it's a changing dynamic and that that's always going to be the case, and that there are issues on both in Ukraine and in Russia with respect to what comes out in public. But given the amount of money that the United States has put into supporting this effort, given the support among the American people, and given the support in Congress, it seems to me that we owe people the ability to have a public hearing and to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Secretary Rubio, I don't answer this question if you don't feel it's appropriate, but did I understand you to say that the portion of the discussions regarding settlement in Ukraine, regarding security for Ukraine, are essentially agreed to by both sides? Because that's news to me, and it's a big news item if that's a fact.
Well, I think you could argue they're agreed to from our side of the equation. There's obviously a Russian dynamic at play here. And of course, any security guarantees would come into play after the conflict were to end. Of
course.
And so there's that component to it. But the broader point I was making is that in all these discussions about security guarantees that people are putting out there, it's pretty clear that the only security guarantee that people keep pushing forward is one that involves a deployment of some European troops on the ground, but with a very strong U.S. backstop. My point being, it was in the broader context of the NATO alliance, and that is, we have to understand that even something like that in Europe, they don't have the capabilities of doing a real security guarantee without a U.S. backstop, which tells you the capability gap that needs to be closed. And it's one of the reasons why the president keeps pointing to NATO and its need for our partners to get stronger. And it is true, they've committed to 5% spending. That's obviously going to take some time. But that's really the broader point I was trying to make in that regard. But every notion of security guarantee that's been talked about and that the Europeans have pushed is one that requires a strong commitment by the United States as a backstop, which, in essence means we would be committed, potentially, in a conflict, in a future conflict. And that's something that I think needs to be understood in the context of what I've just described as the problems with NATO capabilities.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you again for your time. I'm going to leave the record open until close of business tomorrow. If there are questions, I'd appreciate it if you'd assist in getting answers to those questions. Great job. Thank you for spending the time with us. We sincerely appreciate it. The American people are lucky to have you as the Secretary of State. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
That was Secretary of State Marco Rubio fielding questions on Venezuela from senators. Rubio says that there have been no impediments with the Venezuelan interim government on creating a working economy for Venezuela that doesn't benefit crooks, corruption, nor geopolitical adversaries of the United States. And he also says that the Venezuelan oil money is in a temporary account in Qatar that's not U.S. money. It's Venezuela's. The U.S. just controls the disbursement of it, which he says Venezuela agreed to for exchange for sanctions relief. Now, moving on, President Trump warning Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he's playing with fire. This after the Democratic mayor commented on federal immigration enforcement operations in his city. In a post on X yesterday, the mayor said, quote, "Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws, and that we will remain focused on keeping our neighbors and streets safe." This came after his meeting with Border Czar Tom Homan, who is in Minnesota to oversee ICE operations. The mayor added he wanted to see the federal operation end. In a post on Truth Social today, Trump responded saying, quote, "Could somebody in his inner sanctum please explain that this statement is a very serious violation of the law and that he is playing with fire?" Trump said the comment from the mayor is surprising and came despite a good conversation with him earlier. The mayor reacted to Trump's post today, saying the job of our police is to keep people safe, not enforce federal immigration laws. A man has been arrested after spraying an unknown liquid at a Congresswoman Ilhan Omar during a town hall meeting in Minneapolis. Audience members restrained the man before he was arrested. Omar's office said the Minnesota Congresswoman was not injured, and she continued her town hall after the incident. Police say the man has been charged with third-degree assault. It happened after Omar called for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to resign and for ICE to be dismantled. Yesterday's incident came on the same day the United States Capitol Police raised its threat assessment for members of Congress for the third year in a row. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says more than 500,000 families have signed up for the Trump administration's investment accounts in recent days. Bessent's comments come as the administration promotes the initiative created this year under Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
From an early age, our citizens will be able to observe the benefits of free markets in real time, and it's all thanks to President Trump. Trump accounts are a generational down payment on the American dream. They are the culmination of more than 2 centuries of capitalism and financial markets changing the world, and they are the key to unlocking the next 250 years of our national prosperity. By giving each newborn citizen a material stake in the American dream through Trump accounts, President Trump is minting future investors on every rung of the economic ladder. He is embedding, there's an investor. He is embedding financial literacy in the next generation, and he's creating an ownership economy to help secure the American experiment for the next century, the next 250 years.
Treasury will deposit $1,000 into investment accounts for all children born between 2025 and 2028. The initiative has drawn wide support so far. In December, billionaire investor Ray Dalio announced he would help fund Trump accounts for certain children in Connecticut. Michael and Susan Dell have contributed over $6 billion. Today, J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America announced they will match $1,000 contributions to Trump accounts for eligible children of employees. Companies such as BlackRock, Charter Communications, Uber, Visa, and MasterCard have also pledged support. Bessent said there will be additional contributions from private investors, which will be announced later today. Meanwhile, during the summit, President Trump noted that Visa will have a mechanism that allows cardholders to put their credit card rewards into Trump accounts.
The size and scale of this wealth will dwarf all government programs ever created to benefit America's youth. There's never been anything like this. That's why everybody's talking about it. Even really people that truly hate me are making this investment. Under this administration, we're going to leave every child with real assets and a shot at financial freedom. We'll ensure that Americans don't just end their lives with a nest egg, but instead all Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg.
President Trump also announced that he's giving EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin a new job. Zeldin will be in charge of getting building permits for California residents who had their homes destroyed by the 2024 fires. President Trump today urged Iran to come to the table and make a deal on nuclear weapons, or the next U.S. attack would be far worse. In a Truth Social post, Trump said a massive armada of U.S. naval forces is heading toward Iran, led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and other warships. The president says the fleet is moving with purpose and remains ready to fulfill its mission swiftly if needed. Trump repeated his long-standing demand that Iran agree to a deal that includes no nuclear weapons. The president says time is running out and that any attack will be far worse than Operation Midnight Hammer, which took out the country's nuclear capabilities. The U.S. deployment comes amid heightened tensions over the protests in Iran and the regime's violent repression, which has left thousands of protesters dead. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today. Senators are probing U.S. actions in Venezuela, where the U.S. military captured former socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro. Rubio defended actions by the U.S., saying Venezuela was hosting basically all of America's adversaries from across the globe.
For Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter.
Rubio added that getting Venezuela back on track might take some time, and that results can't be expected after just 3 weeks. Similar to Rubio, the committee's ranking member, Senator Jeanine Sheehan, also talked about China in her opening remarks. She showed that China has a diplomatic presence in significantly more countries than the U.S. She said the Trump administration should focus on competing with adversaries such as China. And Rubio also explained that removing Maduro wasn't just a Republican undertaking. The Biden administration first imposed a bounty on the socialist leader. And Rubio added that the Trump administration still tried to remove Maduro peacefully.
I want to be clear, and I'll share with you what I've shared publicly. We made multiple attempts to get Maduro to leave voluntarily and to avoid all of this because we understood that he was an impediment to progress. You couldn't make a deal with this guy. Okay? This guy has made multiple deals. He's broken every one of them. As a point of example.
Rubio also said he thinks the U.S. will soon be able to open a diplomatic presence in Venezuela, and that Washington has already established direct lines of communication with the new leaders in Venezuela. First Lady Melania Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange today. The First Lady made some remarks beforehand as she promotes her new documentary.
In the near future, cultural influence will matter as much as economic power. Our ability to tell our stories and emotionally connect with audiences is paramount. People long to be moved. We need stories that inspire dreams, offer hope, tales of redemption, sad stories, love stories, and funny stories.
The movie, titled Melania, depicts the First Lady's life during the 20 days leading up to President Trump's second inauguration. The movie highlights her fashion choices, operations surrounding her Secret Service detail, and her role as an advisor to the president. Ahead of the film's theatrical release on January 30th, the President and First Lady will attend a premiere tomorrow at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'll cover more news right after this break.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. As tax season begins, President Trump launches Trump Accounts, the new savings program aimed at helping families build long-term wealth for their children. We have the latest on a high-profile summit in the nation's capital. Secretary of State Marco Rubio appears before the Senate today to outline President Trump's Venezuela policy. It's the first time Rubio has publicly faced lawmakers' questions since the capture of Nicolas Maduro. President Trump repeated his demand that Iran come to the table and make a deal on nuclear weapons. The president said if not, the next U.S. attack would be far worse. A government funding deadline is approaching as lawmakers remain divided over DHS spending. A look at the negotiations and the latest on ICE operations in Minnesota. Amazon is cutting 16,000 jobs in its second round of layoffs in 3 months. What's behind the cuts?
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Wednesday, January 28th. I'm Victoria White. President Trump warning Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he is playing with fire. This after the Democratic mayor commented on federal immigration enforcement operations in his city. In a post on X yesterday, the mayor said, quote, Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws, and that we will remain focused on keeping our neighbors and streets safe. This came after he met with Border Czar Tom Homan, who is in Minnesota to oversee ICE operations. The mayor added that he wanted to see federal operation end. In a post on Truth Social today, Trump responded saying, quote, could somebody in his inner sanctum please explain that this statement is a very serious violation of the law and that he is playing with fire? Trump said the comment from the mayor is surprising and came despite a good conversation with him earlier. The mayor reacted to Trump's post, saying the job of our police is to keep people safe and not enforce federal immigration laws. FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is investigating signal chat groups protesters in Minnesota have been using to coordinate activities. He says they're looking for anything illegal that might be going on. Here's more on that.
The FBI is investigating groups allegedly organizing anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis. Director Kash Patel said the Bureau is examining whether protest activity in Minneapolis has violated federal law. Patel said the investigation was prompted by reports that rioters were organizing activities through groups on the encrypted messaging app Signal. Speaking on Fox News yesterday, Patel said he was made aware of an influencer's reporting who said he infiltrated a Signal group used by rioters and protesters.
The Signal chat group is information we collect from the public because we repeatedly request the public provide us with information they have.
Patel suggested there was a possibility these chats were being coordinated by people around the country, not just in Minnesota. These groups have been allegedly sharing information about ICE agents' movements. Patel said the FBI is looking into whether anyone in them has been inciting violence.
We are not going after people and infringing on their freedom of speech to peacefully protest. We are definitely not going after people and their Second Amendment right to bear arms. Only if you incite violence and or threaten to do harm to law enforcement officials and break the law in any other way does it become an investigatory matter. So this Signal chat is something that we, the FBI, are looking at and spearheading.
The investigation comes as federal authorities are investigating shootings by ICE officers in Minnesota. Speaking to Fox News, Patel urged the public not to be swayed by media narratives.
Do not let the media cement a false narrative. Let these investigations run its course. Let us do our job with our interagency and state and local partners, and let's all take a breath and calm down the situation.
The FBI also says federal authorities have arrested 4 people over the alleged theft of sensitive information from government vehicles earlier this month. The documents were allegedly stolen when protesters and agents clashed after an ICE officer shot a man in the leg. In a post on social media, one person claimed the documents contained the full names of FBI agents, phone numbers, and emails, as well as maps on where they are staying and where they are holding illegal immigrants. Patel warned earlier this week it is illegal for anyone to track and dox federal agents. In a post on X, he said the FBI is chasing down every last person responsible for attacking, impeding, or threatening federal law enforcement doing their jobs.
A Friday deadline to fund the federal government is drawing near. Senate Republicans are asking Democrats to clarify their expectations around funding for the Department of Homeland Security to find a compromise. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that and updates on ICE operations in Minnesota.
The atmosphere on Capitol Hill yesterday was uncertain as Democrats unite against funding the DHS. They are calling for reforms, though they haven't put forward a unified proposal on what those would look like.
The bill is passed without objection.
Last week, the House passed the $1.2 trillion spending package at issue. It would fund the Departments of Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, and the DHS. The so-called minibus spending package seemed on track to pass the Senate until just a few days ago. That changed in the wake of the shooting of Alex Preddy, a protester carrying a firearm in Minneapolis, by Customs and Border Protection agents. Senate Democrats vowed to oppose the DHS component of the funding package in the incident's aftermath. Senate Leader John Thune called the death of Preddy a tragedy and called for an investigation into the shooting.
I'm glad that the president is sending Tom Homan to Minnesota, and I hope that his arrival will help restore order to the situation.
Thune called for reflection on some of the rhetoric leading up to the incident.
I also hope that recent tragedies have inspired some soul-searching among those who have participated in or encouraged abuse toward ICE officers and other law enforcement officers.
On that note, Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner called ICE officers a small bunch of wannabe Nazis yesterday during a press conference. Krasner vowed that they would be hunted down like Nazis were for decades and brought to justice. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is calling such comparisons shameful and said they lead to increased tensions. Senator Chuck Schumer labeled ICE actions as abuses and criticized the administration.
The Senate must not pass the DHS budget as currently written and must be reworked to rein in and overhaul ICE to ensure the public's safety.
President Trump yesterday called for an investigation into the shooting incident and has expressed a desire to reduce tensions in Minnesota.
Well, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
The administration has withdrawn Greg Bovino, commander-at-large of the U.S. Border Patrol overseeing operations in the Twin Cities, in favor of border czar Tom Homan. But Democrats are demanding legislative changes before they'll back any bill containing DHS funding. While no unified message has emerged, several Democratic senators suggested potential changes. Senator Chris Murphy mentioned an independent investigation into Preddy's death, ending what he called roving patrols and calling for more education and body cams. For now, Majority Leader Thune says Republicans plan to move forward with the spending bill as a single package, adding that leadership is prepared to pursue a Plan B if that effort fails. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A man has been arrested after spraying an unknown liquid at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar during a town hall meeting in Minneapolis. Audience members restrained the man before he was arrested. Omar's office said the Minnesota Congresswoman was not injured and she continued her town hall after the incident. Police say the man has been charged with third-degree assault. It happened after Omar called for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to resign and for ICE to be dismantled. Yesterday's incident came on the same day the United States Capitol Police raised its threat assessment for members of Congress for the third year in a row. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today. Senators are probing U.S. actions in Venezuela, where the U.S. military captured former socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro. Rubio defended actions by the U.S., saying Venezuela was hosting basically all of America's adversaries from across the globe.
For Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter.
Rubio added that getting Venezuela back on track might take some time and that results can't be expected after just 3 weeks. Similar to Rubio, the committee's ranking member, Senator Jean Shaheen, also talked about China in her opening remarks. She showed that China has a diplomatic presence in significantly more countries than the US. She said the Trump administration should focus on competing with adversaries such as China, and Rubio also explained that removing Maduro wasn't just a Republican undertaking. The Biden administration first imposed a bounty on the socialist leader. And Rubio added that the Trump administration still tried to remove Maduro peacefully.
I want to be clear, and I'll share with you what I've shared publicly. We made multiple attempts to get Maduro to leave voluntarily and to avoid all of this because we understood that he was an impediment to progress. You couldn't make a deal with this guy. Okay, this guy has made multiple deals. He's broken every one of them. As a point of example.
Rubio also said he thinks the U.S. will soon be able to open a diplomatic presence in Venezuela and that Washington has already established direct lines of communication with the new leaders in Venezuela. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says more than 500,000 families have signed up for the Trump administration's investment accounts in recent days. Bessent's comments come as the administration promotes the initiative created this year under Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
From an early age, our citizens will be able to observe the benefits of free markets in real time, and it's all thanks to President Trump. Trump accounts are a generational down payment on the American dream. They are the culmination of more than 2 centuries of capitalism and financial markets changing the world, and they are the key to unlocking the next 250 years of our national prosperity. By giving each newborn citizen a material stake in the American dream through Trump accounts, President Trump is minting future investors on every rung of the economic ladder. He is embedding, there's an investor. He is embedding financial literacy in the next generation, and he's creating an ownership economy to help secure the American experiment for the next century, the next 250 years.
The Treasury will deposit $1,000 into investment accounts for all children born between 2025 and 2028. The initiative has drawn wide support so far. In December, billionaire investor Ray Dalio announced he would help fund Trump accounts for certain children in Connecticut. Michael and Susan Dell have contributed over $6 billion. Today, JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America announced they will match $1,000 contributions to Trump accounts for eligible children of employees. Companies such as BlackRock, Charter Communications, Uber, Visa and MasterCard have also pledged support. Bessent said there will be additional contributions from private investors, which will be announced later today. Meanwhile, during the summit, President Trump noted that Visa will have a mechanism that allows cardholders to put their credit card rewards into Trump accounts.
The size and scale of this wealth will dwarf all government programs ever created to benefit America's youth. There's never been anything like this. That's why everybody's talking about it. Even really people that truly hate me are making this investment. Under this administration, we're going to leave every child with real assets and a shot at financial freedom. We'll ensure that Americans don't just end their lives with a nest egg, but instead all Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg.
President Trump also announced that he's giving EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin a new job. Zeldin will be in charge of getting building permits for California residents who had their homes destroyed by the 2024 fires. Amazon is laying off 16,000 employees, marking the company's second major round of job cuts in 3 months. The company says it is striving to stay competitive in the fast-moving artificial intelligence sector. In a blog post, Amazon said reductions that are aimed at speeding up decision-making by cutting layers of bureaucracy. The company previously announced the elimination of 14,000 corporate jobs in October. The moves are part of CEO Andy Jassy's push to run Amazon with the agility of a startup. Combined, the layoffs represent about 9% of Amazon's corporate workforce. The company says the cuts are focused on efficiency rather than cost savings. Amazon says it will continue hiring in areas critical to its future growth. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to hold interest rates steady when it announces its policy decision today, a pause that investors believe could extend through the spring. Recent economic data shows continued resilience. The unemployment rate fell to 4.4% in December, even as job growth slowed. Inflation remains elevated, with economists expecting the Fed's preferred inflation gauge to come in at about 3% year over year. That's above the central bank's 2% target. Some analysts say strong consumer spending and supportive fiscal policy have reduced the urgency for additional rate cuts. President Trump has called for sharper rate cuts. Trump also commented on the slipping US dollar yesterday and whether that could be helpful for people in Iowa.
The dollar's value decline more. Would that be helpful to Iowa?
No, I'd want it to be just seek its own level, which is the fair thing to do. You could have it. I could have it go up or go down like a yo-yo.
Gold prices surged to record levels on Wednesday, rising above $5,300 an ounce for the first time. The rise comes as confidence in the dollar weakens. Analysts say demand is being driven by shifting confidence in global monetary policy and a search for safe haven assets. The dollar remains near four-year lows, making dollar-priced gold more attractive to overseas buyers. And coming up, new developments in the nationwide redistricting battle. Democrats' effort to gain 4 more congressional seats in Virginia struck down by a state judge. And Republicans fighting to keep the status quo in New York.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now. shenyun.com.
I'm Jonathan Lawson.
If you're 50 to 85, I have an important message about security. Write down the number on your screen so you can call when I finish. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. This is a lock for your life insurance, a rate lock that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. But be careful. Many policies you see do not have one. But you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. Call this number to learn more. This plan was designed with a rate lock for people on a fixed income who want life insurance that fits their budget and is simple to get. Coverage options start at $9.95 a month, less than 35 cents a day. Act now, and your rate will be locked in for life. It will never increase, guaranteed. This is lifelong coverage that can never be canceled as long as you pay your premiums, guaranteed. And your acceptance is guaranteed, with no health questions. You cannot be turned down because of your health. Call for your information kit and read about this rate lock for yourself. You'll also get a free beneficiary planner. Both are free with no obligation. Don't miss out. Call for information, then decide. Read about the 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. Don't wait. Call this number now.
Call now and you'll also get this free beneficiary planner. Use this valuable guide to record important information and your final wishes, and it's yours free just for calling. So don't wait. Call 1-800-357-4821 for your free information. That's 1-800-357-4821. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-357-4821. That's 1-800-357-4821. 1-800-357-4821. Call now.
Restaurant quality pho with no wait. In just 4 minutes you get bold authentic Vietnamese flavor with Pholicious. Available in beef or chicken. Crafted from real beef tallow or chicken, it's comforting and full of tradition. Just add your favorite fresh extras. Every bowl comes packed with everything you need for the ultimate pho experience and ready in minutes. Bring the bold, authentic flavors of Vietnam straight to your home. Pholicious is now available at Walmart or walmart.com.
A nationwide redistricting battle is underway as both sides aim to give their party the upper hand for the midterm elections. A judge has ruled against Democrats in Virginia. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the updates.
The U.S. House of Representatives is currently held by Republicans with a bare-bones majority. Democrats in Virginia are racing to finalize congressional lines in a bid to give Democrats the upper hand for the 2026 midterms. The effort met with pushback yesterday. Judge Jack Hurley Jr. ruled that state lawmakers broke rules when they started the process during a special session last year. The judge stated this blatant abuse of power by a majority ignores their own rules and resolutions, thereby trampling any and all procedural rights of the minority. Democrats plan to appeal the ruling, which is a major setback to their plans to gain up to 4 more seats in the U.S. House. The developments in Virginia come as Republicans are trying to protect a congressional seat in New York. A seat held by Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, the lone Republican representing the New York City area, is on the line. A judge this week ruled that the seat covering Staten Island and Brooklyn dilutes the power of its Black and Hispanic voters. Republicans are appealing. Several other states are pushing to redraw lines as both parties try to give themselves the upper hand in the midterms before voters even make it to the ballot box. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
This weekend's winter storm and the bitter cold that followed have caused prolonged power outages for hundreds of thousands. The damage from ice and cold was most significant in an area from East Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, and into Tennessee. Here's an update on power recovery efforts.
Around 100 million people are under cold alerts for frigid temperatures that will stick around for days. More record lows are expected in the south and east through at least this weekend.
We could be looking at a while before a lot of people see power, even potentially into next week. And with the weather right now, that's a concern.
In Lafayette County, Mississippi, a majority of customers are still without power. Crews there are facing challenges with the cold weather and debris from trees.
Due to the impact of the trees falling, power lines snapping, the roadways are very impacted from that, and that just delays the linemen being able to get to those areas because we've got to get all that debris cleared out.
The governor of Mississippi deployed about 500 National Guard members to assist with debris cleanup and traffic control. Still, it takes time. A similar obstacle faced by crews in other southern states like Tennessee.
We've already had a few scenarios where lines have been restored on one stretch of a roadway, and just around the block, another line will come down as a new branch falls.
First Lady Melania Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange today. The First Lady made some remarks beforehand as she promotes her new documentary.
In the near future, cultural influence will matter as much as economic power. Our ability to tell our stories and emotionally connect with audiences is paramount. People long to be moved. We need stories that inspire dreams, offer hope, tales of redemption, sad stories, love stories, and funny stories.
The movie, titled Melania, depicts the First Lady's life during the 20 days leading up to the President Trump's second inauguration. The movie highlights her fashion choices, operations surrounding her Secret Service detail, and her role as an advisor to the president. Ahead of the film's theatrical release on January 30th, the president and First Lady will attend a premiere tomorrow at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Talk about breaking the bank. Chicago police say they're looking for suspects who stole an entire ATM machine. This security video shows them connecting it to a Jeep with chains and then ripping it out of a store. It appears to show 5 thieves, but police say they're looking for up to 7 offenders. Investigators say the group might be responsible for a string of recent burglaries. Officials say a Chinese man has been sentenced up to 46 months in prison for his role in scamming $37 million from U.S. citizens. Jing Liang Su pleaded guilty last year to working with a group of co-conspirators to operate an illegal money transmitting business. Prosecutors say the ring scammed 174 Americans. The other members allegedly include American and Chinese citizens living in California, Mexico, Cambodia, and China. Su himself was living in the United Arab Emirates, according to prosecutors. The crime ring operated out of Cambodia. Its members would get in touch with victims over social media, calls, text messages, and dating apps. They would then send victims links to fake cryptocurrency investment websites and direct any funds the victims would transfer to shell companies. Su would receive a commission for every transfer he helped facilitate. Yale University is expanding its financial aid program starting next fall. The school will be offering free tuition for families making less than $200,000 a year. For families making under $100,000 a year, Yale will cover all costs for those students. Officials say that with these changes, nearly half of U.S. households with kids under 17 could qualify for the total financial aid package. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, the sticker price to attend Yale per year, including tuition, room and board, and other fees, was nearly $92,000. The school says the change reinforces its commitment that cost will never be a barrier to a Yale College education. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he's directed government agencies and public universities to stop filing pensions for foreign worker visas. Abbott wrote yesterday that Texas should primarily hire U.S. citizens from the state instead of H-1B visa holders. He also asked the heads of state agencies to provide information about workers currently on H-1B visas and any current petitions. Abbott wrote, state government must lead by example and ensure that employment opportunities are filled by Texans first. Immigration advocates and university professors criticized Abbott's decision, arguing it will affect the quality of research at public universities. Abbott's action follows a similar directive issued by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in October. President Trump has also implemented a new rule to increase the odds of higher wage workers being selected for H-1B visas, as well as a $100,000 fee. And coming up, the US officially leaves the Paris Climate Agreement. The White House says the move protects American energy independence.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
President Trump today urged Iran to come to the table and make a deal on nuclear weapons, or the next US attack would be far worse. In a Truth Social post, Trump said a massive armada of US naval forces is heading toward Iran, led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and other warships. The president says the fleet is moving with purpose and remains ready to fulfill its mission swiftly if needed. Trump repeated his long-standing demand that Iran agree to a deal that includes no nuclear weapons. The president says time is running out and that any attack will be far worse than Operation Midnight Hammer, which took out the country's nuclear capabilities. The United States has officially withdrawn from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, completing President Trump's repeated promise to leave the global pact. The administration says the agreement undermines American energy independence, pressures the U.S. to fund other countries, and imposes unfair regulations. President Trump said the U.S. must prioritize affordable, reliable energy production, including oil, gas, coal, and nuclear power. Despite leaving the agreement, the administration notes that America has led global reductions in CO2 emissions over the past 2 decades. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said South Korean officials would travel to Washington this week for talks. The visit follows President Trump's threat to restore tariffs on Korean imports to 25%.
You can imagine that after the message went out, the Koreans swiftly contacted me and contacted others. Again, last summer, we reached a framework agreement with Korea. We implemented our portion where we modified our tariff rates. They were at 25%. We moved down to 15% for Korea as a show of good faith. They have not executed their part. They haven't implemented it. They have a commitment to invest $350 billion in the United States over the next 3 years. And they also have a commitment to allow more U.S. cars into Korea, to eliminate some of their non-tariff barriers on agriculture, to treat our digital companies fairly.
Greer says the Koreans have introduced new laws on digital services and still haven't been able to pass a bill to deliver the promised investments. The trade rep also said South Korea has not done what it needs to do on agriculture and industry. Greer added that it's hard for the U.S. to continue to hold up its end of the bargain while they have not moved swiftly enough on their end. President Trump said yesterday that the United States will negotiate a solution with South Korea. He offered no further details on potential concessions or timelines. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Beijing today as he begins a 3-day tour in China. Starmer is travelling with more than 50 British business representatives. He is set to meet Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang. On Friday, Starmer will hold talks in Shanghai with local officials. The last meeting between a British Prime Minister and Xi took place in 2018 by then Prime Minister Theresa May. Starmer said before the visit that he can strengthen trade ties with China while not harming relations with the United States.
We are resolute about being outward-looking, about taking opportunities, building relationships, having confidence globally, and always being absolutely focused on our national interest. And it is in our national interest to engage with China.
Relations between the UK and China have cooled for years due to concerns about security risks posed by the Chinese Communist Party. Those include Beijing's repression on political freedoms in Hong Kong, China's support for Russia in the Ukraine war, and allegations by British security services that China regularly spies on politicians and officials. Starmer's visit comes a week after his government approved plans for a mega Chinese embassy in London. The proposal has drawn controversy. 19 organisations last week issued a joint letter to Starmer to prioritise human rights in his discussions with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. The letter urges the Prime Minister to raise China's escalating repression in Hong Kong, Tibet and the Uyghur region, as well as the violations of freedom of religion and belief across China, including the persecution of Christians and Falun Gong practitioners. The letter also calls on the Prime Minister to address the issue of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China. It mentioned the China Tribunal, which concluded the main victims of the organ harvesting are Falun Gong practitioners. A British newspaper reports that a Chinese spying operation has been hacking the mobile phones of senior London officials for years. The report comes as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is heading to China to meet with leader Xi Jinping on possible trade deals. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
A UK news outlet reports that the mobile phones of senior British officials were hacked by a Chinese spy operation between 2021 and 2024. The Telegraph said on Monday the hacking exposed the communications of the closest aides to former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak.
Well, it's not surprising at all, and it follows hot on the heels of a whole bunch of confirmed cyber attacks on the UK.
NTD could not independently verify these claims. It's unclear whether the breach included the mobile phones of the prime ministers themselves. However, the Chinese spying operation known as Salt Typhoon is suspected to be ongoing, which raises the possibility that the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, may also have been exposed. Starmer is flying to China on Tuesday, the first by a UK Prime Minister in 8 years, in an effort to secure trade and investment with Beijing. Critics have accused Starmer's Labour Party of jeopardizing national security by taking a soft line on hostile Chinese activity.
We now have this uncritical engagement with China, with Keir Starmer going to China, lowering the drawbridge and really offering quite a lot in return for what will be very little.
In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg on Monday, Starmer said the UK wouldn't have to choose between the US and China in response to questions about whether his meeting with Chinese leaders would anger President Trump. The UK security service MI5 alerted the British Parliament last November about the threat of Chinese spying. But according to a report by the Associated Press 2 years ago, U.S. officials had first alerted the UK in 2024 after finding out that hacking groups had gained access to telecom companies around the world. The Telegraph reports that in the past, China's foreign ministry dismissed the claims as baseless and lacking evidence. In addition to listening to and recording calls, the hackers reportedly had access to metadata and geolocation data, which provided them with information on who officials were communicating with and their locations. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And coming up, Secretary of State Marco Rubio appears before the Senate today to outline President Trump's Venezuela policy. It's the first time Rubio has publicly faced lawmakers' questions since the capture of Nicolas Maduro.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. The highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today. Senators are probing U.S. actions in Venezuela, where the U.S. military captured former socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro. Rubio defended actions by the U.S. And that Venezuela was hosting basically all of America's adversaries from across the globe.
For Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter.
Rubio added that getting Venezuela back on track might take some time and that results can't be expected after just 3 weeks. Similar to Rubio, the committee's ranking member, Senator Jean Shaheen, also talked about China in her opening remarks. She showed that China has a diplomatic presence in significantly more countries than the US. She said the Trump administration should focus on competing with adversaries such as China. And Rubio also explained that removing Maduro wasn't just a Republican undertaking. The Biden administration first imposed a bounty on the socialist leader. And Rubio added that the Trump administration still tried to remove Maduro peacefully.
I want to be clear, and I'll share with you what I've shared publicly. We made multiple attempts to get Maduro to leave voluntarily and to avoid all of this because we understood that he was an impediment to progress. You couldn't make a deal with this guy. Okay? This guy has made multiple deals. He's broken every one of them. As a point of example.
Rubio also said that he thinks the US will soon be able to open a diplomatic presence in Venezuela and that Washington has already established direct lines of communication with the new leaders in Venezuela. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says more than 500,000 families have signed up for the Trump administration's investment accounts in recent days. Bessent's comments come as the administration promotes the initiative created this year under Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
From an early age, our citizens will be able to observe the benefits of free markets in real time, and it's all thanks to President Trump. Trump accounts are a generational down payment on the American dream. They are the culmination of more than 2 centuries of capitalism and financial markets changing the world, and they are the key to unlocking the next 250 years of our national prosperity. By giving each newborn citizen a material stake in the American dream through Trump accounts, President Trump is minting future investors on every rung of the economic ladder. He is embedding, there's an investor. He is embedding financial literacy in the next generation, and he's creating an ownership economy to help secure the American experiment for the next century, the next 250 years.
The Treasury will deposit $1,000 into investment accounts for all children born between 2025 and 2028. The initiative has drawn wide support so far. In December, billionaire investor Ray Dalio announced he would help fund Trump accounts for certain children in Connecticut. And Michael and Susan Dell have contributed over $6 billion. Today, JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America announced they will match $1,000 contributions to Trump accounts for eligible children of employees. Companies such as BlackRock, Charter Communications, Uber, Visa, and MasterCard have also pledged support. Bessent said there will be additional contributions from private investors, which will be announced later today. Meanwhile, during the summit, President Trump noted that Visa will have a mechanism that allows cardholders to put their credit card rewards into Trump accounts.
The size and scale of this wealth will dwarf all government programs ever created to benefit America's youth. There's never been anything like this. That's why everybody's talking about it. Even really people that truly hate me are making this investment. Under this administration, we're going to leave every child with real assets and a shot at financial freedom. We'll ensure that Americans don't just end their lives with a nest egg, but instead all Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg.
President Trump also announced that he's giving EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin a new job. Zeldin will be in charge of getting building permits for California residents who had their homes destroyed by the 2024 fires. Amazon is laying off 16,000 employees, marking the company's second major round of job cuts in 3 months. The company says it is striving to stay competitive in the fast-moving artificial intelligence sector. In a blog post, Amazon said the reductions are aimed at speeding up decision-making by cutting layers of bureaucracy. The company previously announced the elimination of 14,000 corporate jobs in October. The moves are part of CEO Andy Jassy's push to run Amazon with the agility of a startup. Meanwhile, combined, the layoffs represent about 9% of Amazon's corporate workforce. The company says the cuts are focused on efficiency rather than cost savings. And Amazon says it will continue hiring in areas critical to its future growth. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to hold interest rates steady when it announces its policy decision today, a pause that investors believe could extend through the spring. Recent economic data shows continued resilience. The unemployment rate fell to 4.4% in December, even as job growth slowed. Inflation remains elevated, with economists expecting the Fed's preferred inflation gauge to come in at about 3% year over year. That's above the central bank's 2% target. Some analysts say strong consumer spending and supportive fiscal policy have reduced the urgency for additional rate cuts. President Trump has called for sharper rate cuts. Trump also commented on the slipping US dollar yesterday and whether that could be helpful for people in Iowa.
See the dollar's value decline more. Would that be helpful to Iowa?
No, I'd want it to be just seek its own level, which is the fair thing to do. You could have it. I could have it go up or go down like a yo-yo.
Gold prices surged to record levels on Wednesday, rising above $5,300 an ounce for the first time. The rise comes as confidence in the dollar weakens. Analysts say demand is being driven by shifting confidence in global monetary policy and a search for safe haven assets. The dollar remains near 4-year lows, making dollar price gold more attractive to overseas buyers. And First Lady Melania Trump rang the open bell at the New York Stock Exchange today. The First Lady made some remarks beforehand as she promotes her new documentary.
In the near future, cultural influence will matter as much as economic power. Our ability to tell our stories and emotionally connect with audiences is paramount. People long to be moved. We need stories that inspire dreams, offer hope, tales of redemption, sad stories, love stories, and funny stories.
The movie, titled Melania, depicts the First Lady's life during the 20 days leading up to President Trump's second inauguration. The movie highlights her fashion choices, operations surrounding her Secret Service detail, and her role as an advisor to the president. Ahead of the film's theatrical release on January 30th, the president and First Lady will attend a premiere tomorrow at the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. Nicki Minaj is speaking at the Trump Account Summit in Washington, D.C. Let's tune in.
People judge you by, are you successful at, at the things that you said you were going to do. So versus the average politician, they're just a politician who may want to be a celebrity. They don't care if their policies work 2 months from now, 2 minutes from now. They don't care if they inspire the next generation. They just care about getting in office. This is a different human being. This is a different president. This is a different kind of leader. This is a businessman and an authentic human being. So when he says that he wants to contribute something long term, way after he's in office, that's what he means. And you get to see all of these other people that are, that have a lot of money and that have a lot of influence. They're drawn to that. It's like a magnet, because everyone wants to make a change. Well, the good people want to make a change for the better. So,
probably not Gavin Newsom.
Oh, no, he doesn't want to make a change. Absolutely not. Newsom only wants to be seen. He does not want to do anything credible with his time or life.
It's true.
I knew that would get them clapping. No.
And while he's on topic, what did you make of our great Treasury Secretary's comments about Newsom in Davos?
So spot on. That's one of my new heroes, I told you, now, because of the way he so calmly and confidently obliterated Newsom.
He is he's very effective, especially when it comes to destroying the left when it comes to arguments. And so let's get off of Newsom because he's kind of a boring topic, right?
Very.
So, last question here is, all of the president's great achievements, from tax cuts to securing our border to bringing factories back home. I personally believe the Trump accounts will have the longest term effect, because 20 years from now, 18 years from now, kids are going to, be able to inherit this money, get this money, and they're going to have $50, $100, $200,000, $300,000 in their bank accounts. And I read today that if they're 28 years old and the money continues to grow, it could be up to $1.1 million by the time they turn 28 years old. And so, do you agree that this is going to have lasting impact?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It changes a huge part of the country. It changes the trajectory of so many lives. And now these children will be able to loosen up a bit. Enjoy, being young, enjoy, time being in high school and in college, knowing that they can have fun again while becoming a businessman or a businesswoman. Like, to me, there's nothing greater, well, almost nothing greater, than teaching financial literacy to young people. I think it's so important, and I think it should be in the curriculum in schools, actually. Because it's a life-changing thing. They don't teach it, and it's what children need. It's what everyone needs. And these children, some of them, will be able to teach even their parents about investing, right? And I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Nikki, I think everybody here is so grateful for your appearance. I know the president is. And we have a very special place we need to go visit now, so we have to cut this a little bit short. But, this was such a fun discussion with you, yes. And we are so grateful for you using your platform for good, advancing, highlighting the great victories of this administration, and also, I think most importantly, speaking out in defense of Christians who are being persecuted. You're incredibly courageous, and we're grateful for you.
I appreciate you guys. And thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. And thank you to our amazing president and his amazing administration. May God continue to bless them in all that they do.
Thank you, guys.
Speaking live at the Trump Account Summit, and stay tuned for NTD Newsroom right after this break.